Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel, Open Mic Special Edition.
Thanks there, Sugar, for the wonderful intro. Wasn't sure if you do your Kratz voice or not.
Well, he's here.
Always. Yeah, so welcome everyone. We're having a little special edition open mic. This is a little bit different than what we actually, it's really different what we normally do, but Neverly and Doc are taking a break from reading with the crew for a couple of weeks. So we thought we would, we did somewhat of a conversation after we read the state's response, but this is a true, more of a more poignant rebuttal, as it were. We're going to cover, Doc is going to cover several points. Obviously there'll be discussion and so forth from the state's reply, and then Cherie has written a summary of what she took from the state's reply. We're gonna go through that too. It's not real long, but it's really good. So we thought that we'd share that with everyone. Like to certainly say hello and thanks for everyone for tuning in and joining us in this continuing saga between Avery, Zellner, Avery, and the state. Hopefully here soon. I'm pretty sure that Zellner has already filed to ask to reply, and hopefully it won't take Judge Angie long to give her the approval to do that. I think once that's done, I think she has 15 days, but don't quote me that. I'm not a lawyer, so. Anyway, let's greet everyone here in Discord, and we'll say hello to everyone in the live chat. And we're going to do one thing before we get started, that to kind of showcase a couple of things, and then we'll get rolling. So, first of all, hello, Cherie. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Welcome everybody to Open Mic.
Hey, thanks, Cherie. And Kratz, Sugar, Susan.
Hey now. Welcome everybody in the chat, everyone not chatting, everybody on the panel. Glad to see you here. Should be interesting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Susan. And Sister Rhonda.
Already unmuted. Sorry about that. Hello, everyone on the panel, and hello, everyone in chat. And we're just going to rock and roll and have some fun. So let's do it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rhonda. And Christine, I'm not sure. I know you were dealing with a few things there at home, but if you can, say hello.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my fellow panel members and to everyone in chat. And I just want to say I am so thankful for Cherie and her sharing this summary. It's nice to have a legal brain. Dr. Silkman is amazing for the science stuff, and having Cherie is such a blessing when it comes to understanding the legal aspects of this case, because what's common sense to us, I think we're all beginning to realize, just isn't common sense to attorneys. They enjoy the law more than they do justice. Not all of them. I'm not speaking about all, but the prosecutor's side for sure. So certainly. Just thanks for that.
Hey, thanks, Christina. And of course, Dr. Silkman.
Thank you very much, Jack 61. I'd like to welcome all my fellow panel members and everyone in chat for a special edition today. As you know, the state had filed a response to Kathleen Zellner, and what we want to do, it probably won't take too long, right, Jack 61?
No, hopefully not.
What we want to do today is just have a general round the table discussion, and hopefully we'll get some good interaction with all you guys who are in chat. What we're going to do is we're going to not look at the entire response by the state, but we're going to look at those 8 critical points. I believe there were 8 that the state put up basically stating, look, Bobby Dassey couldn't have done this for the following reasons. And we're just going to have a discussion of each of the 8 points, followed at the end by a summary by Cherie. She wrote a legal summary of the state's response, and Sunshine Christina is correct. Not all of us are experts at all areas, and I'm certainly not a legal eagle. So we're very, very blessed and fortunate to have someone like, I don't recall, Cherie, on the panel to give us a legal aspect. So it's great to be here. And yeah, I can't wait for the discussion. Thank you, Jack 61.
Yeah, thanks, Doc. So,
Hey, Jack.
hey.
Jack. I just like to invite Anthony Hills into my secret room. Come on over, fella. We'll have some fun.
Oh dear. Well, okay, I guess that's a private conversation, but okay, works for me. Okay, let's greet everyone in the live chat, which I see. Anthony says, "No way, you're SOL there, Kratz. Sorry."
Such a party pooper. Party pooper.
There's Becca. Thanks for coming, Becca. Dark Side, the lovely Dark Side, and the lovely Cat. Who else we got here? I'm scrolling. There's Rhonda SD, Pete Moss, BW Haggis. Oh, hey, Sean. Hey, thanks for coming, Sean. BW Haggis, and then there's my internet wife, Nosy. Thanks for coming, Nosy. Still scrolling, guys. There's JD. There's Graham Moss, Andy B. Yeah, a little bit. I'll talk about Andy B here in a minute. He did a little project for us. There's Kay. Thanks for coming, Kay. And there's Allie's Softball Life. Thanks for coming. What else we got here? There's Pete. Dan's Life. Thanks for coming. There's Gloria, Angie Dickinson, Sherry. You guys are way up here. Ronald Cass. Hey, thanks for coming, Ron. Case 10 reporting. Can you postpone this till tomorrow night? I got a work thing. I have a great open mic. Oh, come on. Well, hey, you can catch up with it later there, Case 10. I know you're a working man, so these harvest time, they don't really have any choice about what they have to do. And behind the magic, the very first one. All right. Give me just 1 second here.
Jack, did you get Jason Bennett and BW Haggis?
I got BW. I didn't get Jason, so thank you.
Jennifer Manning as well.
Oh, and Jennifer. Hey, thanks for coming. Okay, so I'm back over here to another screen that I need to be. All right, so what I'm going to do first, and talking with Susan and Zoe and others, they work really hard, really behind the scenes doing various things. And one of them, I'm going to show it here, is the merch store. Now, we do talk about the merch store from time to time. We don't really push it. I'm going to push a little today because they do do a lot of work in trying to create these designs that will capture your eye and all the proceeds, the profits proceeds. We don't get any of that money. What's that, Susan?
I was just going to say, 'tis the season.
That's right. That's exactly right. Let me get it over here on the page I wanted. They do a lot of work in creating these designs, and we're going to show them off a little bit. It is the season to be jolly. Buy a T-shirt, a tumbler, a handbag, whatever. The profit proceeds, we don't get any of that. We don't want any of it. It all go. Where's it going to now, Susan?
anything with Daniel Holtzclaw or Uncuff the Innocent merch will go to Uncuff the Innocent, and then everything else is going to the Center for Integrity in Forensic Science, CIFS.
Awesome. See, there's a coffee mug right there. Woo-hoo. And then back over to some new things that got added today. Let me see if I can find that rack. It's on here, the last page. These just got added. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, tell all your family and friends that's what you want for Christmas. A little merch from Foul Play.
There you go. And there's all these various colors here you can pick from. This is the newest one that's been added. I know that Susan.
In your face.
Yeah.
I really like this design. It looks really good, y'all.
I know Susan and Zoe, they talked about those arrows, the different types, and Zoe was kind of limited, but it is a very pointed and straight to the point message. So
I think it will draw attention to people, and maybe they'll ask you about Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey.
Absolutely. So anyway, anyone else want to add anything before I jump off the merch store? I just wanted to point this out. I mean, it's still there. We don't get any of the profits. We don't want any of them. It all gets donated. All the profit proceeds get donated to somewhere that can use the money in forensic science or some aspect of the legal community or whatever.
And Anthony, yes, I do believe you can pay with PayPal. Click on one, check. Oh, I guess you'd have to put it in your cart.
Oh, I'll put it in my cart. I don't care.
And then check out.
You got to go through. You got to go through this process. Payment method right there. It's not really telling me, but yeah, I think you can use PayPal. I think.
I do too. Payment methods. You see number 3 down there?
Yeah, it's down there, but
you can't click on it.
I can't click on it. No, you got to fill out the other stuff first.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you can.
So there you go.
I can do a long length top XXX. No problem, Clive. If you tell me what which design you would like, I will make one for you. And I can do that for anybody. If you have a particular product with a particular design that you don't see, let me know. Easily done.
Yeah, Teespring's pretty good at working with these designs and getting them created.
And then I also want to mention Christina has postcards. You want to talk about it, Christina?
Sure. So Becca designed some postcards and bumper stickers. Now the postcards are free. We're asking if you want them, just to get them and send them out to Governor Evers, maybe to the AG's office in Wisconsin. The bumper stickers are $5. Anyone that's interested, let me know. You can contact me by email or through Discord. And all of those proceeds, and also this was, we went through Stephen before we did this, and he knows about it and he approves of it. The proceeds from the bumper sticker sales will go to fund more records requests, which Stephen is okay with that as well. Into his case, Brendan's case, and other cases we work on. So, and they're $5. They're super cute. I have one on my car. Hold on. I'll go out there and show y'all real quick. Do we have time?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
All right. Let's see. And thanks, Susan. I was wondering how to bring it up. So you can't really, it's a black bumper sticker and it has the state of Wisconsin. So I have free Stephen Avery over here and I have free Brendan Dassey on this side. So, and if these do well, we want to, we will probably expand and do them for any of the cases that we work on as a way to help spread the word and spread awareness. I'm a sticker person personally, so yeah. So thanks.
Absolutely.
That was awesome. That was
Yep.
awesome. Going out with a camera.
Absolutely. Well, as advocates, I consider myself an advocate in this, and that's, before I ever went audio, and it was really with, Irkose, briefly, to a small degree, then obviously with foul play. All I ever did was read and research and post. I didn't get on it and say anything in the open, in the public, to the public, but I consider myself an advocate now. And I think that most of us here are now, we're knowledgeable, know about the case. And, we try to impart that. And, if you're going to if you're going to advocate, it's kind of what you have to do, I guess. I mean, other people advocate in different ways. I get it. But I think we have to be able to be somewhat, a little bit vocal about it for support.
Christina?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was a little bit distracted. Did you mention where the money's going for the bumper stickers?
Mm-hmm. So the cost of the bumper stickers $5, and that includes me shipping it out to you. And the money will come back to us. The money goes to fund records request. And foul play paid for the bumper stickers. So, if we sell them all, it's a couple $100 to help fund records requests to help further research into these cases. I think it's awesome personally. So yeah.
Sure is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, sure is.
Looks like I see a green BW Haggis.
Yes.
Yeah, look at there.
Foul play obsessed.
Member for 6 months. Hey, thanks, BW. Appreciate it. Before we move and get into the slides, one final thing. Susan, you want to talk about the donation that Foul Play did recently?
We did. Foul Play did make a $250 donation to CIF's Center for Integrity in Forensic Science, and they had a law firm that offered to match any donations. So it ended up they actually received $500, which I think is just freaking awesome.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yep, it was. So it was that went
and
through.
that was in Foul Play's name. So you all are part of it.
Absolutely. We
can
generate
order from Canada. Sorry.
We no, you're fine. I mean, the whole thing is we generate ad money, and that money just sits there doing nothing unless we, as Christina talked about, we FOIA, right. We open records request something, or we get some kind of court document and get really ripped off at $1.25 per page. Something. The money is just sitting there. Why not use it? Why not let? So that was something we had a discussion about. And I think it was a great.
That was out of our ad money, from YouTube.
Correct. Mm-hmm. That wasn't any from any sales from the merch store. That was Foul Play money for ad generated money that you guys are part of here that got sent because So anyway, I thought it was a great suggestion. I think everyone did.
Yeah,
So,
it was awesome, actually.
yeah,
It worked out
absolutely.
well.
And just to let you know, the bumper stickers are not on the merch site. That you go through Christina. Send
Christina.
her a
Yeah.
message,
Yeah, well,
or you can send any of us a message, and we'll get it to her.
I'll get on YouTube and put the email in that you can message me at, or you can message me on Discord, those of you who have Discord.
Oh, that would be great.
That's a good
And
idea to put
send
it
it
below here. Yeah.
Send that to Kat and Darkside so they can tag you, a couple of times throughout the podcast. So, all right, let's move on. Doc, I'm going to turn this over to you now, and you tell me when you're prepared for me to present the slides, and I will.
Yep, awesome. Look, thank you very much, Jack61. As you know, Kathleen Zellner has put in a filing, a motion for post-conviction relief and to get an evidentiary hearing. And essentially what she has claimed in that particular motion is that she's named Bobby Dassey as a Denny suspect, and also the fact that there were Brady violations as well regarding Ramlow as well as some others. So I want to say straight up front, no one on this panel, right guys, no one on this panel is saying that Bobby Dassey has committed any crime or any offense.
Absolutely not.
Right? Absolutely. So please, if you're listening in chat, or you're going to listen to this podcast later on, or Barb comes on, or a family member comes on, we're not pointing a finger at Bobby Dassey, right? We're looking at the motion, the filing that Kathleen Zellner put in, and why she considered Bobby Dassey as the perfect Denny. You got to understand, guys, is that what was very frustrating for Stephen's defense team back in 2007 was that they were not allowed to point a finger at anybody else. They're not allowed to bring up any other potential Denny suspect. And trust me, there were many potential Denny suspects back in 2007. Now, due to a stipulation with the state, they agreed that the only person that they could point a potential finger at, was none other than Brendan Dassey, right? And, which is rather bizarre, because if you're defending Stephen, you're not going to call up Brendan and say, oh, you're a Denny, you murdered Teresa Hallbach, right? The whole idea for Stephen's defense team is that Stephen didn't commit this murder, and nor did Brendan. So back in 2007, the state really had the upper hand when you think about it, right, guys? The state put the defense in a tight box, and they couldn't point a finger at anybody else. And back then, in 2007, there was a lot of suspicion and doubt on Bobby Dassey. Now, we know that in the intervening years, every type of filing that Kathleen Zellner has put forward has failed, right? So along the way, what has been very frustrating is that the state essentially told Kathleen Zellner what she must do, right? You need all Denny prongs, 3 Denny prongs. You need to have, viable Brady violations, etc., etc. So now, with the latest observation by Tom Sawinski, she had her 3 prongs to make Bobby Dassey a Denny, right? Now again, as I said to you before, none of us are accusing Bobby of doing anything, committing any crime. But guys, this is business now, right? This is business. Stephen and Brendan have been in prison since 2006. 2005 for Stephen, 2006 for Brendan. They've been in prison for a long time already, and they've always pleaded their innocence. They've never said, look, yeah, okay, I did it. I'm sorry, I deserve my punishment. They've always maintained their innocence. So Kathleen Zellner has now presented a filing to the state in which she said, okay, I'll give you a perfect Danny. It's Bobby Dassey. In other words, Bobby Dassey has committed everything from top to bottom. Because unfortunately, as we know, if Kathleen Zellner mentions law enforcement in any involvement at all, it's going to hit hard, as in it's going straight in the rubbish bin. Right, guys? Do you agree or you don't agree?
I think it has that real potential to put them off, and they're just going to scoff, and it's going to drive them, and I'm saying them, the state, to maybe a conclusion they might not go to anyway. But they'd be like, okay, fine, you don't trust anyone, and you're calling our cops murderers, basically, or planters at minimum, and you've done all this shit. So I think it has that potential to put a lot of heat in the adversarial process, I guess is the way I should say it. Maybe.
Correct. Because remember, we're talking about the legal system here.
Yeah.
And we looked at the Attorney General's Department in one of our podcasts that we did a long time ago. The Attorney General's Department is massive, right, guys? It consists of a lot of branches, a lot of attorneys, a lot of specialists, and I believe 2 crime labs. So it's huge. So if you now are saying that law enforcement had an involvement either in the murder or in the planting, they're not going to take this too lightly. Now, the reason why I say this is pretty obvious, guys, right? You have a look at what happened to Stephen in 1985, where it was obvious that he was being set up by Kaseric, Vogel, and other players. It's obvious, right? Through the depositions, you could tell, right, Jack 61, Stephen was targeted and set up.
Absolutely. With the state certainly learning in May of 2005, when the cold case hit on Gregory Allen happened, and they didn't say a damn thing. They kept it quiet. And I think that shows some real culpability and what the state is willing to do to protect themselves. That's a huge thing to me. It's a huge thing to me, guys. It really is.
Correct. So it is a forewarning, right? Kathleen Zellner would have noted this, and it's a forewarning because in that particular situation, it was clear cut. Kaseric and Vogel and others went after Stephen, despite all the noise in the background that, hey, and Sunshine Christina could talk about it for hours, hey, you better look at this guy, Gregory Allen. Now, think about what Peg Lockenschlatter did, right? The Attorney General whitewashed the report and attributed no blame to anybody. It was just simple mistakes, and they ultimately blamed the victim, right? Penny Bernstein.
Yes.
Right? So if you think about it, this was a clear-cut example of police corruption to the max, right? And Stephen, he may not have gained $36 million. He would have been ecstatic even with $1 million. But, guys, the damage would have been done to Kaseric, Vogel, the MTSO, law enforcement, and all the way to the Attorney General's office. It would have been terrible, right, Jack 61?
It would have rolled if that would have come out in 2005. And I'm going to talk just a second about this cold case. But if that had been exposed in May or June of 2005 during those depositions, it would have ignited, and it would have rolled right back to Consort and Vogel. I think it would have. I'm not really real satisfied with a lot of the journalists that were in the mix at the time. Iraq, a lot of shit after the fact, but I don't know that anybody would have, how much they would have actually went after these guys, but that would have been a huge deal because they let him go. They let his ass go. I got one more thing to say about that this thing that Sunshine Christina found, this 1991, where this woman had this hell beat out over and was sexually assaulted. In 99, when that detective ran that DNA and it popped a marker, I've thought since then, obviously I can't prove it. None of us can. But I've often wondered if he ran that, down to his superior and said, look, this guy did this. Some phone calls were made. Whatever reason, shuffle. The case gets closed. And then they don't even contact the victim to let her know we know who did it. They don't do anything. They close the book on it. And I question why that happened. Now, again, I don't want to get way off track here of our podcast topic, but you have to wonder what these conversations were between Minnesota officials and Wisconsin officials. Because
correct.
Come on.
Listen.
And there were conversations. Of course, there were conversations because their border states, they have a easier policy of dealing with criminals who commit a crime in Minnesota and run to Wisconsin and
flee.
Versa.
They flee.
And so they want us to believe that they didn't network, but they've networked. And another thing I want to add to the conversation, they would have had a harder time selling Manitowoc's involvement in the Teresa Halbach investigation if Gregory Allen's crime had been exposed along with their attempt to hide it, right?
I don't think they could have ever done it, Christina. I just don't think they could have done it.
No, I think that exposing Gregory Allen's cold hit match and their attempt to hide it would have opened the door for the FBI or someone to supervise what was going on, right? Because the DOJ was supposed to be supervising, and we all know they just, at minimum, looked the other way. And I think it most likely they spearheaded and helped ensure that this case was airtight against them.
Possibly. Yeah, that's very possible.
Correct. So, and as people have mentioned in chat, other cases under Kocerik's watch would have been likely reinvestigated as well. Furthermore, they would have had a look at the crime lab or crime labs and had a closer look at the forensic evidence and the examination of the forensic evidence. Potentially, guys, don't make a light joke of it. This could have exploded and caused the MTSO and Wisconsin to implode. That's the effect, right?
Yeah.
And look no further. Jack 61, you back me up. Look no further than what happened to those two lab techs that were dealing with the drugs, right?
Yeah. How to fuck up how to fix a drug scam.
Correct. One wasn't even doing the testing, and the other one was constantly high and consuming all the samples.
Yeah.
Now, before you laugh, it had a drastic effect in which over 10,000 cases, these are people who have been put in prison on drug charges, had to all be released. All 10,000 cases, if not more, had to be dismissed because you could not trust the forensic evidence. So you could imagine what potentially could have happened to Culhane and other members in the crime labs. Further, you've got the controversial Ricky Hochschlatter case. The same individuals that you see there, you see in the Stephen Avery case back in 1985 and even in 2005. So it would have had a huge potential. It's pretty clear that Peg Lockenschlacker had to take a hit for the team and shut it all down. Right, Jack 61? Right, guys?
She did.
I'm not pretending. It's obvious. She whitewashed all the sins of the MTSO, Kocerik, and now, if the district attorney is willing to do that, imagine Kathleen Zellner now presenting a filing to say, believe.
I don't see an app for
law
that.
enforcement.
You'll need to download one.
Right? If you say law enforcement was involved, her filing would have gone nowhere. So it's a real tough sell. So she did what the state actually told her to do. And that is, okay, present your Denny suspect. Now, from all the things that she had, from all the material that she had, there's one person that stood out, and that was Bobby Dassey. So she presented that to the state. The state, right, Jack 61, right, guys? The state even told her what to do, and Judge Willis even agreed. Remember that Bobby had at least two of the prongs.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
in effect, there's nothing really she could successfully do to put in a motion a new filing for Stephen. Right? Her main avenue now, since the Tom Swinsky call came out, was to say, all right, I'll present you the perfect Denny. Now, are there problems? Yes, there are. So what we're going to do today, guys, is I think have a look at not the whole lot. We're just going to have a look at the 8 points that the state said there's no way Bobby Dassey could have done this, right? So we're going to have a look at those 8 points. And then Cherie later, she's done a beautiful summary, legal summary of the response by the state. And when you think about it, some of the points that we're going to be discussing now, you could damn betcha that Kathleen Zellner is writing down. Right, Jack 61?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
She will be coming up with the counter arguments to say, hey, wait a minute, what about this and this and this? So this is what we're going to do. And people in chat, you can get involved too. When we cover each point, ask yourself, could it have been Bobby? Yes or no? Could it have been Stephen? Yes or no? Or could it have been law enforcement, right? Or a third party, an unknown person, right? Now, I want to state this sincerely. I believe in Stephen's observation. And that's why if you saw the actual thumbnail of the podcast, Stephen said, I saw her leave. Now, if you believe in Stephen's innocence, that's a non-negotiable. Right, guys?
Well, it has to be. It has to be our base. It has to say what you will.
It has to be a non-negotiable, because if Stephen is lying, that opens up completely up to being Teresa's murderer. No question about it. You can't have it both ways. Stephen consistently said, I paid her, I saw her leave. I went inside, I put my magazine on the computer, I eventually came out, I was going to my sister's place, I didn't see Bobby's blazer. So Stephen had obviously told family members, and I'm sure he spoke with Jody, to say, you should look at Bobby because I think he was the last one to see Teresa Hallbach. And that's why we got into this big kerfuffle, right? Regarding who's telling the truth. Is it Stephen? Is it Bobby? Or could it be that both are telling the truth and have just got a few events out of sequence, right? So, right, Jack 61. So both could have been telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean,
if you
just briefly, I mean, but then, we see what law enforcement did. They took that one thing, and it's like they're saying that Stephen said, you did it, Bobby, when in fact, that's not what he said. But they twisted the knife to create that division, and that has to be recognized. So go ahead, Doc.
100% correct. 100% correct. With the reading with the crew, we've discussed exactly how the pressure was pulled on Bobby by Deidre, Heimerl, other people that interviewed Bobby Dassey. He was put in a terrible, unenviable position, right? So what the law enforcement tried to do is set one against the other. And Barb, who's come on chat many times, have said that's exactly what they did, and they isolated us. They didn't even have a chance to talk to each other, have proper conversations, because they were always being taken apart and being separated, right? So what I want to do is make a start. And Jack 61, can we have the very first slide? Slide number 1.
Yeah, give me about 20 seconds here, guys.
No hassles at all. So what we're going to do is set the scene, what the state are alleging, and we'll go around the table. We'll have a look at all the points, get everyone involved, and guys in chat, you too, give us your 10 cents worth. Tell us what you think. Remember, have a look at these 8 points and ask yourself, could it have been Bobby? Could it have been Stephen? Could it have been law enforcement? Or could it have been someone totally different? Now, as we can see, here's slide number 1. Rhonda, would you like to read that slide? Do you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah, would you like to read it out? So this is what this is setting the stage for the state.
Okay. Response opposing a motion for an evidentiary hearing and post-conviction relief under Wisconsin statute 97406. The state of Wisconsin, by undersigned counsel, opposes defendant Stephen Avery's motion for post-conviction relief and request for an evidentiary hearing pursuant to Wisconsin statute 97406. He claims that his newly discovered purported witnesses, Thomas Sawinski's testimony, would have allowed him to meet the 3-pronged Denny test to introduce third-party perpetrator evidence at trial and allege that Bobby Dassey, Avery's nephew, committed the murder and then planted all of the evidence to frame Avery.
Okay. Thank you so much, just Rhonda. So one can clearly see here is that Kathleen Zellner has presented one Denny suspect. That's Bobby Dassey. So in effect, she's saying, all right, what's the greatest chance of success to get an evidentiary hearing for me, for my client, Stephen Avery, right? This is full-scale war, right? The state are not going to give any leeway at all to Kathleen Zellner or to Stephen. The state are going to hammer them at any possible time. At any time, they're not going to be. You have to fight fire with fire. Just Rhonda, do you have a comment?
Oh, nope, sorry, I forgot to mute.
Jack 61.
Oh no! I forgot to
All
mute.
good. All good.
Yep.
All right. So you can clearly see the state are going, okay, so you think Bobby Dassey committed everything, right? The murder, the planting of the forensic evidence against Stephen. Let's test the veracity of that, right? So in other words, the state are going into bat for Bobby Dassey to basically say to Kathleen Zellner, no, he's not a Denny, right? So let's have a look at slide number 2. All right. Who would like to read that one out? Who would like to read that one out?
I'll read it.
Oh,
Okay.
So,
Have Sunshine.
slide 2.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yep. Slide 2 says Avery has offered no facts at all that would establish how Bobby Dassey, an 18-year-old high school graduate with no criminal record whatsoever, and who was working third shift at a furniture factory, managed to steal at some unidentified time prior to October 31st the rifle hanging above Avery's bed with which the victim was shot, and at some other unidentified time before November 5th, managed to replace it with Avery's never noticing.
All right. Now, let's discuss this, right? So first of all, Has anyone 18 or under ever murdered anyone?
Oh, yeah, of
Oh
course,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So you notice what the state have done, right? The state are going, come on, how could an 18-year-old high school graduate with no criminal record, pot and working third shift, Now remember, we're not saying Bobby Dassey is a killer. What we're doing is having a look at what the state wrote. Sunshine Christina.
Isn't this gaslighting attorney style?
Yep, correct. So in other words, off the bat, they're saying, how ridiculous can it be to blame an 18-year-old? So can an 18-year-old potentially murder somebody?
His brother was
Of
15.
course.
Yeah,
Yep.
his brother was
Correct.
15 and was convicted of murder, right?
Correct. His younger brother is sitting in a prison cell, right? And he's definitely all right. He's definitely under 18. He got convicted for rape, murder, mutilating a corpse, right? So 18 and under can potentially murder. Do high school graduates potentially murder people?
Sure do.
Absolutely. All the time.
Yep. Okay. So if that's your first murder, would you have a criminal record prior?
Nope.
Nope.
No. And even if you work the third shift, sorry, Jack 61.
I was just going to say, we don't have access to juvenile records, but I'm not entirely sure that what they said there is accurate.
Yeah, me either. And also, in my experience, people who deviate from what society deems normal are night owls who work odd shifts because they like to move around when no one else is paying attention. That was Gregory Allen's MO. He loved,
Right.
the late hour. So it's interesting that they point that out.
Correct. 100% correct. But it's interesting how the state are taunting Zellner. Is taunting Zellner. What a preposterous statement. How an 18-year-old high school graduate with no criminal record who works a third shift at a furniture factory could possibly have committed this crime. Now, have a look at what the state said for point number 1. Managed to steal at some unidentified time prior to October 31st the rifle hanging above Avery's bed with which the victim was shot, and at some other unidentified time before November the 5th managed to replace it with Avery's, never noticing. What's blatantly wrong with that statement right there? Jack 61.
No, go ahead, Christina. Go ahead, Christina. You go ahead first.
I just want to say this. They have the same exact gun. So she actually just handed Zellner a freebie because if Zellner recalls that Bobby also had, wasn't it a Marlin 22? It's one of the most common 22s in America. All Bobby would have had to do, which we know that forensics on the bullet matching is sketches at best, he could have just swapped the guns out and Stephen never would have noticed it was missing because he never would have noticed there was a gun missing because Bobby's was hanging in its spot.
Correct. My understanding is that Bobby Dassey had the exact same weapon. I think Chuck also had the same type of weapon as well. It was a very common weapon. And on the Avery salvage yard, there were multiple issues of that particular gun. Exact same weapon.
It wouldn't surprise me. I just want to add this. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that Pa Avery didn't buy one for every one of the kids at some point, like as a present.
Correct.
Possible.
And as Mystic Jins pointed out, that wasn't Stephen's rifle. Those two weapons that were hanging in his bedroom, they belonged to Roland Johnson, right?
That's right.
So they were on a gun rack on over the bed, overhanging the bed. So they weren't even Stephen's weapons, right? But why what is the fatal flaw of what they just said in point number 1?
Well, I don't know if it's what you're particularly looking for, Doc, but what I was going to say is that even it's where this is where it gets really convoluted. Someone could kill someone and not have done any of this other thing, other shit that happened, the planting. And I always reference the key and what happened with the key and what they did, what he did with it. Well, everybody knows that key was planted. He knows it. He knew it, or he wouldn't have spent an inordinate amount of time. We bitched about this 100 times. He spent so much time in his closing, even going so far as saying to the jury, "Hey, let's forget about that key." Basically, so what if the cops helped out? They thought they're sure he did this. He killed her, so they just helped out a little bit. Okay, once you cross that line, once you cross that fucking barrier, then they could do anything else to help the case because they think he did it. So,
Correct.
To me, this opens up a whole nother area that says, and again, I'm not saying Bobby killed her at all when I'm going to say this, but if he did, that doesn't mean the cops couldn't have helped out with that too. The blunt and bloody instrument that fucking disappeared out of the back of that RAV at the crime lab on November 6th, 2005. It's bullshit. It's total crap. So anyway, go ahead.
Correct.
And we also know the DNA on the bullet is just bogus as hell, with the wood and the paint chip on it. And also that the forensics on the bullet came from that gun. I think that's total trash science. Although, it's what they used in the case, and Buting and Strain did not have an expert to dispute that evidence. But
excellent point.
So, yeah.
Excellent point. But you see what the fatal flaw is. The fatal flaw in their argument is that the rifle up above Stephen Avery's bed was used by Stephen to shoot Teresa Horbach. That's the fatal flaw in the argument, because they never linked the rifle. They never linked item FL to the cranial bone fragments.
That's right.
The state never did that. So the state actually can't prove that Stephen Avery had fired the rifle which fired item FL.
Total implication. Total implication.
It was implied. So notice what the state are saying as fact. It's not fact. They cannot prove that anyone, including Bobby Dassey and Stephen Avery, had actually used that rifle to shoot at Teresa Horbach or at anybody else. The state have made an assumption. They're basically laughing at Kathleen Zellner, saying, well, how in the hell could Bobby have taken that rifle and shot Teresa Horbach and then replaced the rifle? There's two problems. That's a common rifle at the Avery salvage yard. Bobby Dassey had the same one. So Bobby Dassey potentially could have used that weapon to kill Teresa Horbach, just saying, as an argument's sake. But to imply that the rifle hanging in Stephen Avery's bedroom was the rifle that killed Teresa Horbach, the state never proved it, right? And that's why Kratz, in his book, said, where did I say that item FL struck Teresa Horbach in the skull, right? He didn't. He implied it. He implied it during the trial. Jack 61.
No, I was just going to say exactly what you just said right there. He implied it. He wants to try to convince everyone that's exactly what happened, but he can't prove it because there were bullets everywhere on that property out of that gun. Raleigh had gave sworn testimony to that.
Correct. Now, so this is a fact that can easily be disputed, right? So in front of a judge, Kathleen Zellner would demolish the state's assertion that the rifle was used to kill Teresa Horbach, because the state never proved that item FL was connected to the cranial bone fragments, right? So when the cranial bone fragments were x-rayed, they had metallic flecks. So when a bullet strikes bone, it leaves behind a part of its coat. The state never did an elemental analysis of the lead flakes, right, Jack 61? They never checked it.
No, they could have metallurgically, is that a word? Connected one to the other.
Correct. So the state never checked the cranial bone fragment lead with the lead composition of vitamin FL. Now, you think about the risk if they did, and the lead composition was different between the cranial bone fragment lead and item FL. Boom. You got no idea who had shot Teresa Hallbach, right? So point number one, you could toss it out because the state never proved that item FL struck Teresa Hallbach. And as Susan said, further analysis of item FL proved it had no bone shards in it, none whatsoever. When Cherie Cohen looked at item FL, there was no blood, there was no tissue. However, we know that item FL should have never been admissible in a court of law because Cherie Cohen had actually contaminated the PCR negative control. So we know all the shenanigans with item FL. So that statement there, the fact that Bobby Dassey or anybody else had to steal the rifle and then replace it, is complete bogus and bullshit. Because the state never was able to prove that that gun was fired by anyone firing item FL and item FL killing Teresa Hallbach. Guys, would you agree?
Yep, I agree. It was such an implication throughout the trial without them ever saying it.
Correct. And there was no blowback on the gun. There was no presence of blood, no presence of DNA. They didn't even check for fingerprints, right? So number one clearly is an assumption. So here's the question, guys, unless anyone's got any comments. Who likely would have shot Teresa Hallbach? Bobby Dassey? Stephen Avery? Law enforcement? Or an unknown third party? Let's go around the panel, guys. I don't recall. Who do you think likely shot Teresa Hallbach?
I guess I would go with the unknown third party.
Unknown third party. Very interesting. Susan.
It's always been my belief it was law enforcement.
Okay. Very interesting. Jack 61. Who do you think likely shot Teresa Hallbach?
Yeah, I'm kind of a little bit of a segue away from Susan. I think it was an unknown third party, potentially brought in by a former law enforcement person, but it also could have been just an unknown person, a random killing.
Very interesting. Thank you, Jack 61. Just Rhonda, what about yourself?
I would say instead of an unknown third party, I would say Ryan Hilligus with the help of law enforcement as my unknown third party.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you, Just Rhonda. Sunshine Christina.
I think it's either going to be someone at the behest of law enforcement or an unknown third party or a death that was used, an accidental or or known non-criminal death that was used to frame him. That's my thinking.
Interesting. And it's very interesting that nobody said Bobby Dassey nor Stephen Avery, right? And for me, personally, who I believe had shot her, it's someone that was extremely angry, aggressive, vindictive, and shot Teresa Hallbach execution style. It's someone with who got up close and personal to deliver 2 bullets to her head, right? That takes a lot of guts to do that. And normally a hired hand, a hitman, would do something like that. But for me, it's unknown. I do not know who had shot him. And the other thing, of course, is that the cranial bone fragments, they were partial cranial bone fragments. They didn't even measure, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, they didn't even measure the caliber of the bullet holes. They were only partial.
That's right.
Yes. So they never were able to say she was struck in the head by a .22 bullet, right? And of course, we know all the shenanigans about Ida Mafel now, right? The mere fact that it struck wood at high velocity, it never struck bone. And so how Ida Mafel was only found after Wiegert had said to Brendan Dassey, who shot her in the head. So in essence, remember, they never called Brendan up on the stand in Stephen's trial, yet they used Ida Mafel to clinch the deal, so to speak. Unreal. That's
a real. I have a real that really grinds my gears. One of the most insane parts of this case is that, again, Cherie could probably talk a whole lot more about this than I can. I'm just saying, from a legal standpoint, I just don't understand how, after they got Brendan in there and did what they did to him, they ended up, March 1st and 2nd with this search warrant and going in, and suddenly, voila, they find a bullet fragment. And then this is under, and then they move forward and they separate the cases out. But this piece of evidence gets introduced because Stephen and Brendan were considered basically co-defendants, to at least to some, certainly in the media, and in many ways in all the pretrial stuff as well. And then they get to right before trial and like, oh no, we can't use Brendan. Take all his name out of it in Stephen's trial. Can't use him. But they used Adam FL. It's bullshit.
Correct. And the hood latch swab.
And the hood latch.
Correct. So even though Brendan Dassey wasn't called up, they used, as a direct result of him being coerced, they used 2 vital pieces of forensic evidence against Stephen, OMFL, and the hood latch swab, right? So Kathleen Zellner, if she got in front of a judge, could she, now let's put all the cards on the table, could she successfully eliminate Ida Mafel as having killed Teresa Hallbach? Yes or no?
I certainly think so. With that, what her expert found, wood and paint.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wood, paint, and wax. Susan.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again, Doc?
If Kathleen Zellner was arguing this in front of a judge, could she successfully remove Ida Mafel as the bullet that killed Teresa Hallbach?
I would certainly hope so.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. Anybody else got any comment? Certainly, there will be a massive element of doubt, right? Because Kathleen Zellner can argue, hey, it never struck bone, which means it wasn't the cause of death. There was no blood, there was no tissue, right? So hence, how do you explain how it was a through and through hit, especially a .22, doesn't have the penetration power and strength to go right through a human body, right? If it comes out the other side, it would have lost all of its energy, right? As Haig elegantly demonstrated. So hence, how do you explain how it's got wood shards embedded in its lead? And even when they washed the bullet, the wood shards remained. So they were deeply embedded in the lead. So as you can see, point number 1 doesn't even rate on the chart, right? That's classic straw man argument. Jack 61.
Yeah, I wanted to say hello to Barb. Thanks for coming. And Maz, I think I saw her. Yep. But, just to add a little bit, and this is a hypothetical, if it ever kind of thing happened. But if Kathleen was able to get in front of a judge and argue these points, this is theme music. I mean, we look at the key. It was the 6th or 7th time inside that house, and they suddenly find a key, and they're allowed to go back and go back. Okay, and then we come up. Kratz knew he had to somehow connect Teresa to that property. So they get Brendan in, they roll him around, pass him around like a party favor, end up with this statement, and voila, they end up with a bullet fragment. And then that leads to, later on, the hood latch. And it's theme music. It's complete theme music of what the state did.
Correct. So, guys, so we can move on to the next point. Yeah. So can you see that point number 1 has no merit? Because the state never proved that Ida Fell was fired by Stephen. They can't prove it, and they never connected Ida Fell to the cranial bone fragments. And because Ida Fell's got no bone shards, it wasn't the instrument that killed Teresa Halbach. They haven't found the bullets, right? They have not found the bullets that caused her death.
I completely agree.
Right? Yep. So point number 1,
which should have been in the burn pit.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. They never found any bullet fragments. And remember, the entire skull of Teresa Halbach has not been found. Right? And before you all laugh, Robert Durst, the guy that dismembered his next door neighbor, they found every body part except what? The head. Because he knew for his self-defense argument, which he won, he had to prove that the way he shot Morris Black was in pure self-defense, right? But if you shoot someone in the back of the skull, that's hardly self-defense, right? Because the person never saw the bullet coming. And Teresa Halbach got shot once in the back of the skull and once above the left temple. That's savage. That is savage. What do you think, guys? That's an overkill if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Doc. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Ron.
Yeah, that's overkill, and that's the behavior, that's the type of brutal killing that you get from a passion killing, which is typically, probably not always, but typically done by a former somebody, a lover or a spouse, or even if that person was stalking, the individual. That's typical.
Yep, excellent point. So, guys, can you see the way the state is arguing and putting up these points, which they haven't even proved in court, right? So they're basically using a straw man argument, which is exactly classic Ken Kratz. They're making a statement, they've got no proof, and then saying, see, how could Bobby have done this? Well, remember, guys, what applies to Bobby can also apply to Stephen, right? So in my belief, I believe it was a third party that had actually shot Teresa Halbach. Wasn't Bobby, wasn't Stephen, and I don't know who that individual is, but just Rhonda said a very interesting point. That's almost like a crime of passion. Just Rhonda, would you agree? That it's almost a crime of passion, the way Teresa was shot.
That's actually the phrase I was trying to get in my head, but I couldn't form it. But yeah, exactly, a crime of passion.
Correct.
For sure.
Correct. All right,
that's
guys.
Why I've always stuck on the Ryan theory. I don't know how he did it. I don't know where he did it. I don't know any of those things, but I'm just following basic criminal justice theory ideas 101 from my experience, and that's typically that kind of behavior. Crime of passion is done from an ex somebody or other.
Correct. And that's why I believe a true victimology should have been done. I think Bradley Check had made the remark that Teresa Halbach was living a double life Is that correct, guys? I remember reading that somewhere that Teresa Halbach, it was like two individuals, the public persona and the private persona, what she was doing in private, which I believe should have been thoroughly investigated, that put it directly in risk and potential harm's way. Any comments, guys?
Well, with the with the Badera shoots, we've talked about this many times too. We don't know what element, even if she didn't necessarily have direct contact, if it was out there that some less than savory people found out that she was willing to do that kind of thing, whether it has anything to do with it or not, it should have been investigated and looked at, because she did have contact. She did have phone calls. We've got one of them. I think Henberry got her messages from that I can't think, Quadrini character. He'd been convicted of murder.
Yes.
Yeah, he'd been convicted of murder. He called her. And we just don't know.
Was that photographs? Involving photographs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think family photographs or something. So, and it was basically all that stuff was buried, just like the stuff at the quarry was buried, Coast Road was buried, and so many other areas.
Very interesting. All right, guys, can we move to point number 2? Slide number 3. All right. Susan, would you like to read this one out?
Sure.
Now remember, this is in regards to Bobby. This is in regards to Bobby Dassey.
Okay. Could have abducted and killed the victim and hidden both her body and her car in some unknown area in the minutes between her arrival on the property and Scott Tadek passing Bobby Dassey on the highway around 3 p.m. on October 31, 2005. Nor has Avery provided any facts to establish where the killing could have happened, apart from a nondescript quote-unquote in the RAV4, or where Bobby could have hidden the RAV4 and the victim's remains in this short period of time.
All right. So you can see what the state's doing here, right? The state's saying, hey, wait a minute. Bobby and Scott had alibied each other around about 3 o'clock or whatever, bypassing each other on Highway 147. Bobby Dassey couldn't have killed Teresa Halbach because of a lack of time. Any comments, guys?
Well, if you don't believe the alibi.
Thank you. That's they're saying that the alibi is true, and
correct.
So if you're forced to believe the alibi, then okay. But at the same time, I've always had issues with the double alibi because it excuses automatically 2 people right off the bat. So yeah.
So how important is the alibi?
It's critical.
Extremely.
It's critical.
To the state. And how critical is the alibi to both Bobby and Scott?
Critical. Because it removes them from the property. It removes them from the property. So again, removing them from the equation. So it's critical.
Correct. So hence and I know that the state have completely downplayed Bobby Dassey, but what he said was crucial, and I think everyone will agree, when Bobby said, I saw Teresa walking towards Stephen's trailer, because the implications there is that Teresa had remained on the property, whereas Bobby Dassey had an alibi from Scott Tadich and vice versa, saying, we crossed each other on Highway 147 at a crucial time when Teresa Halbach would have been around that time and area. Susan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. So the alibi was absolutely crucial. But did anybody see both Bobby and Scott at their respective hunting spots?
No.
Can anyone confirm they actually went hunting in those places at those times?
Well, as I recall, Bobby's cell phone records put him in another location for the tower locations. Now I know that's not perfect science, but that's what I recall from his phone records that Kathleen has presented in another motion prior to this one.
Okay, so here's just a general question: could have Bobby Dassey bumped Teresa Horbach in the head and hit her body and her RAV4 at Cuss Road and then took off? Is that possible?
If you discount the alibi, that I think that this is, that this is my opinion, and it doesn't reflect on anyone here. It's just an opinion. I think this was a created thing from the state, whether it be Kratz or Fallon or whoever, that got put forth as a way to get around proving where they were at. Whether they had anything to do with it or not is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. It just removes them from the equation, right? So, right. But yes, that potential does exist, Doc. It absolutely does.
But how many times ever would any two parties check their clock for the time after they've passed each other?
It would be, I won't say completely ridiculous, but it would be a bit unusual to say, oh, he looked at his clock when he passed me. That's a little weird, I got to tell you.
Correct. And then, of course, we've got the observation of the propane tank driver, right? If he was 1 hour late, if he didn't put his readjusted his clock, because John Le Guin said, I saw a vehicle looking like Teresa Horbach's RAV4 drive out of the property, right?
And he didn't see this, and he didn't see the bus. That tells me he didn't adjust his clock.
Bus, which meant that you're not going to miss a big yellow and black school bus, right? You will if you're 1 hour early, because Blaine and Brendan didn't get dropped off until about 3:45. So if the propane tank driver had actually seen Teresa Horbach drive out, which is interesting because he never mentioned the Blazer, seeing a Blazer drive out, right? And Stephen only said he saw Teresa Horbach's RAV4 turn left on Highway 147. So you've got all these weird observations that make sense if the propane tank driver hadn't adjusted his clock, right? So it's interesting because if that's the case, guys, we've got a situation whereby you've got Scott Tadich, Bobby Dassey, and Teresa Horbach all around the same area at the same time. Susan.
Yeah, just because Bobby testified to that on the stand does not make it a fact.
100% agree to that.
I completely agree, Susan.
Correct.
And they are acting as though it is complete fact.
Yeah.
That's correct. And this is the danger of trying to put flagpoles in the ground and saying that's the truth. Right? That's an established fact. And it clearly at Jack 61.
I was just going to say that, some of these events are uncorroborated. And that's where the danger you're talking about, Doc.
Correct. That alibi, the reciprocal alibi, is uncorroborated by a third party, right? You've got Bobby alibying Scott and Scott alibying Bobby, and that's it. You've got no third party confirmation. Just Rhonda.
Oh, sorry.
All right. And the other point they made is, why would Stephen know where the killing actually took place if he had no idea where Teresa Horbach had left? How would Stephen have known where the killing? How would Stephen know where the killing took place? Jack 61.
Well, I don't think he could. Other than her blood being inside the RAV. That's the only way. But other than that, there's just he couldn't know.
Correct. So again, they're making this sort of like false statement that has no basis in fact. The only fact we know is this, right? Undisputable. Teresa Horbach's blood was in the back cargo area of her RAV4. Her blood was sprayed on the back cargo door that was opened. There is a broken blinker light from her RAV4 in the back cargo area. Her DNA is in the cherry Pepsi can, and her touch DNA is in the inner door handle on the driver's side. There's no mixtures of DNA at all between her blood and Stephen's. They're separate. But we've got the problem, right, Jack 61, of the blunt and bloody object that allegedly was in the back of the RAV4, and no one knows where it is. Jack 61.
Yeah, that's a huge problem because if they knew on November 6th, I mean, they had, Steve Harrington at the crime lab, he had this, whatever the hell it was, and he's talking to Fassbender like, I've got some damn thing here, whether it be that tire tool or whatever, this lug wrench, it's got blood all over it. What do you want me to do, man? This is nuts. And whatever happened? Did they test it and find out that it belonged to someone else? Was it Teresa's blood? Was it you? This completely changes the course of the investigation. And to me, in my mind, now obviously it disappears. So it just dead ends right there, and it's really frustrating. With that said, there are people out there that say that, oh, this is hearsay, blah blah blah. Bullshit, it's hearsay. This was in an affidavit. In the affidavit, that's a sworn statement by a cop, one of the lead investigators. So it's not hearsay.
Correct. And there's no way that Stephen could have taken that blunt and bloody object if it was written down in a search affidavit.
That's right.
By
the they found it. They found it at the fucking crime lab in Madison. Come on.
That's 100% correct. So basically, it's telling a different narrative, right? It's telling a different narrative. Because remember, the state's expert said that Teresa Horbach was thrown in the back of her RAV4, and that's why you have the spray of blood on the back door. It clearly isn't the case. Teresa Horbach was bludgeoned and could have well died then and there on that spot.
Which,
right?
Doc, isn't that what Casey's expert said? Isn't that what he told her in his affidavit?
Sorry, who? Say again?
KZ's expert, isn't that what he said, that she was likely 100%. Bashed in the head at the back door?
Correct. Yep, correct. If you were repeatedly bashed in the head by a hammer or some type of very heavy metal object, you're likely going to have your skull caved in. You're going to be dead, right? The fact that the blood actually sprayed, you've got very fine capillaries on the top of your head, but the brain is a big source of blood as well. So potentially she could have been killed then and there, right? So it's now presenting a different narrative that the state don't want you to go to, right? And how on earth are they looking for a blunt and bloody object in Stephen Avery's garage if they're the ones that wrote about it in a search warrant, right? Right, Jesse?
I think that, without knowing, because we don't have documentation, obviously, but I mean, to me, that they kept this, they kept that wrapped up in their arms really tight because there it's mentioned nowhere else at all. And as you talked about, it was Sturtevant. I'm sure it was Sturtevant, at least, and maybe one other. They were looking for an object on the property. It was out of her toolkit in her from her Toyota. It was missing, and they were looking for it.
Correct, 100% correct. And a comment made by Mystic Jinx. We don't know when Teresa Horbach was shot, whether she was alive or whether she was dead. Even the forensic anthropologist could not determine that. You don't know. But she was definitely shot prior to being cremated because of the way the bones were burnt. So it wasn't, they could tell by the beveling, the fact that all the beveling, top, bottom, had all been burnt. She was shot prior to cremation. Yeah. So it does say a different narrative. But here's the other problem, right? The problem for the state is that multiple people saw the RAV4 off the property, right? Which meant that Teresa Halbach did exactly what Stephen said. She left, right? You've got Siebert, you've got Ramlo, and you've got another gentleman by the name of Burbik, and then you've got Tom Sawinski, right? All saw the RAV off the property. Now, that's pretty embarrassing for the state because the state is saying Teresa nor her RAV4 ever left the property. So hence, why all of a sudden you have multiple independent witnesses all seeing a car looking very much like Teresa's RAV4 off the property? That's remarkable. Guys, any comments?
Well, it's kind of like the Zapruder film in the JFK assassination. The Zapruder film. That's a huge problem for the federal prosecutors and so forth.
Correct.
It created a whole. Well, we talked about this at length last time after we watched the docu movie, but these other witnesses, that saw the RAV, this creates a real problem. The Sawinski call, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, more before we get out of here, that is a huge problem for the state. I don't care how you slice it. It's whether well, we'll talk about that more later. I'm not going to sidetrack you.
Yes. So my question to the panel and people in chat is, can you completely absolve Bobby Dassey? With point number 2, is it impossible for Bobby to have committed this crime? Yes or no? I don't recall. Yes or no? Is it impossible for Bobby to have committed this crime? No?
No.
Susan?
No.
Jack 61?
No.
Just Rhonda?
I have to say no.
I'd like to add that I don't think
yes,
he
Susan.
did, but I don't think he did.
Yes.
But it's not impossible.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with Susan. Yep.
Yes. So guys, please don't think we believe Bobby killed Teresa Halbach. We're saying, looking at this from a legal point of view, because Kathleen Zellner, if she gets in front of a judge, she has to answer to all these questions, and she's writing a rebuttal, right? So it would not still be impossible. If he followed her out, you don't know what transpired in those minutes, especially if the reciprocal alibi is still very tenuous, right? Because it's never been corroborated. Sunshine Christina, was it impossible for Bobby to have committed this crime? Sunshine Christina? All right, we might have to get back to Sunshine Christina.
she may have had to step away, Doc. Hey, I want to preface this about Denny just briefly. Everybody needs to remember what Kratz did, and it was about a month after the May 13th coercion session that Fassbender and Wiegert had with Brendan. Almost a month to the day. Kratz ran down to the courthouse and filed the third-party crap in June of 2006. So that meant basically for 6-7 months, the defense had their hands tied. They didn't have a hearing on the damn thing until January of 2007. So they were hamstrung.
Correct. Yep, 100% correct. And someone in chat said, who planted Teresa Halbach's DNA on the bullet? Oh, well, this is the big problem now for the state. If I was Cherie Culhane, the safest way to explain it is to say, well, actually, I can't make a comment on item FL because I contaminated the PCR control and I used up all the DNA and I can't retest it. So, Your Honor, item FL should have been inadmissible. That's the safe approach. The other approach is, Miss Culhane, there's 2 options for you. You either contaminated item FL accidentally or you did what Tom Fassbender asked you to do, to put her in his garage. Which option would you choose? Deliberate contamination or accidental contamination? Susan.
I'd also like to say about this slide here, how is in the RAV4 nondescript? That's pretty descriptive to me.
Well, I could answer that. They asked Brendan, they said, well, what did you do? We put Teresa Hallbach in the RAV4 and shot her in the head. And they were horrified. They were horrified. They were, no, Brendan. No, because you shoot someone in the head, you shoot someone 10 times in the back of a car. Jack 61, back me up. Guys, there'll be blood spray everywhere.
Bloodbath.
Of course.
Texas
But
Chainsaw Massacre. Go ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Them just saying that it's nondescript in the RAV4. It is not nondescript. It is describing where she was shot. I mean, it's just worded wrong. It makes no sense.
Correct. But if you're innocent, right? Look at it from Stephen's perspective. If he'd never killed Teresa Hallbach, how in the hell does he know what happened to her? He's got no idea what happened to her.
That's right.
He's got no RAV4. She could have been killed at a quarry. She could have been. So no, he's got no idea. And the thing about Brendan is that Brendan kept on getting everything wrong, right, guys? And he was being guided by Fassbender and Wiegand to say, you never shot her in the car. Oh, yeah, that's right. We shot her on the side of the garage. No, you didn't. Okay, we shot her in the garage. Oh, that's better. So, in other words, they were guiding the narrative, and Brendan was getting all the fundamental issues wrong. Right, guys? He was getting all the major points incorrect. And if Wiegand never told him about the shooting to the head, what did Brendan say to him? He goes, oh, because I couldn't think of it.
I couldn't think of it. Yeah. They had to keep kicking. They kept having to kick him to the direction they wanted to go. Well, okay. And he agreed. I mean, Brendan just couldn't defend himself. And we got
That's correct.
So we got several questions. I don't know if one of the other mods wants to tackle this or what, but Susan, can you read the one that I just pinned from Allie Softball Live?
Says, but Doc, how does Culhane do that when she went against procedure to put Teresa in the garage during trial?
Well, let's think about this, right? IDMFL never struck Teresa Hallbach. It never did. The investigators never found IDMFL the first time round. And they searched the garage, right, Jack 61? They searched everywhere. So here's the big problem. The investigators never, ever thought that Dr. Chris Palanek would have done a intensive investigation on IDMFL and do a lead analysis and look at the tip of the bullet and say, guys, you're barking up the wrong tree. There's no bone shards here. There's wood, which means IDMFL struck wood at high velocity. Not low velocity, high velocity, which means how on earth is a bullet striking wood at high velocity and then strike Teresa Hallbach and leave her DNA on a bullet that's sitting on concrete dust for months and the DNA doesn't degrade down? Anyone got an answer to that one? I can't answer that one.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. It is.
Yeah, so it's crazy. So when the thing is, right, I've worked with DNA. I did my PhD in DNA. I was a postdoctoral research fellow in a professional DNA laboratory. The trouble is DNA is very promiscuous. It's everywhere. Even though you do your best to clean your bench, clean your instruments, DNA can be aerosolized. It's in the air. So if it lands on a pipette, lands on a tube, right, potentially you can cross-contaminate your samples very, very easily. When you're loading a gel to load your samples, a little bit of one sample can go into the next well and you get a false result. That's why you do controls, right? Culhane had been working with Teresa Halbach's DNA at her bench, and she got discovered that she left the swabs at her bench in a cupboard. Instead of putting them in the evidence room, she had them at her bench, which means that if you're going in and out of that cupboard, touching stuff, you can easily cross-contaminate. And here's the problem. When you isolate genomic DNA from a pap smear, it's going to be in high concentration. You get it, guys? High concentration, which means the chance of contamination is extremely high. So if you're working at the bench and you've got Teresa Halbach's DNA anywhere, there's a good chance that you're going to contaminate another sample, right? That's why you do a control. So she contaminated the PCR negative control. Her protocol say, chuck everything out and let's start again. Unfortunately, what did Jack 61? What was the problem with that scenario for Culhane? With the bullet?
Repeat the scenario.
The DNA. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she used it all up. Absolutely. Yeah, she used it all.
She used all the DNA up from the bullet, which means you, me, your next door neighbor cannot retest the bullet. She used all the DNA in the key, right? And what are the two critical elements that nailed Stephen? Idomethel and the key in the bedroom. And they can't repeat the experiments, right? So I just hope Culhane has the gumption to say, yeah, it likely is contamination. It should never have been submitted. Do you think Culhane's going to do that, Jack 61? Susan, anybody? Do you think she's going to ever admit that she's wrong?
Never. Never, never, never. No way. It would implicate
her. Correct.
But
so
I mean, I don't think she will either. Of course not. None of them are going to admit anything. But if she did, I mean, if they offered her immunity, is that something that, I mean, they can't, I guess, because now we're not relitigating the case. But I mean, these are just all what ifs, I suppose. But
if anyone, if anyone admits a mistake, I'm telling Wisconsin's going to burn. If Stephen gets out on a technicality, Wisconsin's going to burn. I'm telling you right.
We'll be reduced to 49 states.
Correct. They're shutting up. Now, look, I've worked in a lab. And I remember distinctively when we had a whole group. These are professional people. When someone was doing a DNA prep, somehow, even if you're in the next room, you ended up cloning their DNA that they're working on. And we proved it because when we were doing DNA sequencing, we're looking at the sequencing results thinking, I'm not working on that clone. Who's working on this clone? And it's a person in another laboratory because you can get cross-contamination. Even when you're careful, you can cross-contaminate. Now, the safest thing for Culhane to have said, I can't submit Idomethel because as a professional forensic scientist, my own laboratory manual says I've got to chuck out all the results because I contaminated the PCR control. She knew the whole case hinged on Idomethel. Right, guys? No Idomethel, you can't prove Teresa was on the salvage yard at all.
That's right. That's right. He had to have that connection.
They had to absolutely have Idomethel. That was the saving grace for an embarrassment for the state because the CSI team went into Avery's trailer and said, boys, there's nothing here. They went in the garage. Boys, there's nothing here. They ripped up the freaking concrete looking for blood. They found nothing. And then, like a unicorn, they found Ida Mafil. And people are going, you got to be kidding me, right? Months after the investigation, you now come up with a crucial piece of crime scene evidence, right? So now you can see why they're now taunting Zellner and us, saying, oh, yeah, how did Bobby... Bobby never did this. He never had anything to do with the rifle. He never had anything to do with the bullet. Neither did Steven. Jack 61.
Yeah, that's why I've bitched so much over the last, couple of years about how many entries into this property they had. I dare anyone to go look at other cases. I'm not talking about Stephen and Brendan's cases. You go look at other cases. I'm telling you, unless there's something really extraordinary, which they had to have, and Kratz knew it, to get back into a property, you got to have an extraordinary event, or a judge is going to say, look, guys, you've been in there 6 or 7 fucking times. You can't go back.
Yep.
Warrant denied. I'm not signing it. Stay out.
What, talking about how funny, how about the way the judge treated Garrison in his trial?
Oh,
Garrison,
my God.
the most crucial piece of evidence, he said, you can't mention it. Why not? There wasn't a lawyer present. And you're going, you got to be kidding. So judges can influence a case. Right, Jack 61?
Absolutely. Heavily. Absolutely.
So,
and Willis did.
Yes. So if Judge Willis stood up and said, boys, come here, come to the counter, come to the bench. Are you trying to now tell me you're going to rewrite the laws of science because you want to, Miss Culhane, Mr. Norm Gunn? You want to rewrite the laws of science, do you? You now want to reject the importance of doing scientific controls. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Willis would have given him 2 fingers and said, get this shit out of my courtroom now. That's what should have happened, guys. That's what should have happened. And remember Norm Gunn with that cheesy grin? People will understand. Bullshit, people will understand.
Common sense. Common sense overrules science.
Common sense, correct. All right. So again, guys, we can't rule Bobby out, right? Potentially, if that alibi was not rock solid, potentially he had the opportunity. Right, guys. Shall we go on with point number 3?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. We got that one up. Who would like to read that one?
I can read it if you want, Doc.
Jack 61. Jack 61.
Okay, number 3. Had the scientific sophistication and knowledge necessary for it to occur to Bobby to collect, transport, and plant Avery's blood from his sink, and, as Avery has completely overlooked, his non-blood touched DNA on the hood latch of the victim's RAV4 and her keys, or how Bobby acquired the skills to do this successfully.
Right. Do we have some comments? Could Bobby Dassey, could he have potentially planted the blood? Yes, no, unlikely. I don't recall.
I guess I would say it would be unlikely, possible, but unlikely. I think somebody would need more scientific knowledge.
Okay, good point. Good point. Susan.
I'll just say that his uncle had recently been exonerated with DNA. Mm-hmm. So I think he could have done it. I don't think he did it, but I think he could have.
Yep.
You take a toothbrush, and rub it on the.
Yeah. Now remember, guys, We're not blaming Bobby for anything. We're just looking at it from a legal standpoint and a possibility standpoint. So what do you say? It is possible or totally impossible?
It's possible. Absolutely.
Okay. Jack 61.
Yeah, I'm going to say, 18, 19-year-old. I guess it's possible. I think it's unlikely that, it's not that I don't think that Bobby's dumb in any way. I just don't think he would have the sophistication to have thought of that. And again, I mean, from the hypothetical standpoint, absolutely, yes. But I don't think he did it.
Okay, so essentially, just Rhonda, your viewpoint.
Well, I was just going to say, just like a lot of the points here, yes, it's possible. I don't think it happened, but it's possible. But I also want to say, in regards to just about everything the state said in response, or the court said, the state said in response, the same things could be said of Stephen. I mean, Stephen would have had to have the scientific sophistication and knowledge necessary to do just about any of the things that they claim happened.
Correct.
But
Correct.
again, we're not saying that he's unintelligent, but we also, I think, some of us agree that he isn't highly skilled in some areas to where he would think ahead to do some of those things. Which takes me back to the last slide that I wanted to say. The same thing, the same things about maybe I did say it, but the same things that they're saying that they're saying about defending Bobby, which again I don't believe that Bobby was involved, but the same things they're saying about Bobby and how improbable certain things are and unlikely and completely didn't happen kind of things, the same things can be said of Stephen and Brendan. And it's like I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but it's what's good for one should be good for the other. But again, that goes back to rededicating.
Correct. So you think it is possible but unlikely?
I think it's possible, emphasis added, but unlikely.
Okay, thank you. Sunshine Christina, are you back? Oh no. She's probably busy with her grandson. All right. Well, me personally, I think it is possible, but unlikely. Essentially, Bobby would have had about 30 minutes before the blood congeals, right? Now, wouldn't it be interesting to determine whether Stephen Avery had some type of disorder in which his blood didn't clot and clot quickly and actually took much longer to clot because he was consistently cutting himself all the time, right? And so it'll be very interesting one day if they ever did an experiment and they took a sample of blood and they put it in a tube and just see how long it actually took for that blood to clot at the same temperature that it would have been on that day, right? Because they know what the temperature was in Wisconsin on the 31st to see how long it would have taken. Or when he had actually opened up his cut, I think it was the 3rd of November, reopened up his cut when he went to Menards. So that'll be interesting to see whether it actually takes longer to clot. But let's think about this, right? If Bobby didn't have the skills to gather up the blood, say from the sink, preserve it, and then plant it, right? Now, remember, if he had killed Teresa Horbach, he knew where the vehicle was. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest the vehicle was at the turnaround, right? It wasn't that far from the Avery salvage yard. To gather up the blood, potentially you could have got a sponge and sponged it up and then dripped it from a sponge. Or you could have got a dropper, any type of small vesicle that can gather up the blood. You only need a small pipette, and it's a salvage yard, right? I'm sure they've got plenty of instruments, etc., to pick up the blood. But if you think that's highly unlikely, let's go around the table and in chat, who do you think had the sophistication to plant blood in that RAV4? Bobby Dassey or law enforcement? I don't recall.
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement. Susan?
I think you know my answer.
Law
Law
enforcement.
enforcement. Yeah.
Jack 61.
Definitely law enforcement, and let's not forget. I'm fixing to throw a photo up of the ignition switch, and we'll make a comment about that. I don't want to detract too far from our discussion, but
Yes.
I think it's important to just say it right quick. Yep, law enforcement.
Law enforcement. Okay. Just Rondo, who likely planted that blood?
Law enforcement.
Okay. Sunshine Christina, if you can hear us. Probably not, but I'm sure she'll say law enforcement. So isn't it rather remarkable? And they also laughed at Kathleen Zellner. What did they say, Jack 61? You should have gone with the police planting theory.
Yes.
It had more credibility.
Absolutely. But
right?
she knows if she did that, the shit that she would have got for it.
Yep, correct. So someone who would have had the sophistication would have been law enforcement and the crime lab, right, for the planting of the blood. And also the hood latch swab, that points straight to Mark Wiegert, right? And so again, pointing to law enforcement. And the key, that's straight law enforcement as well. A third party planting the key, Lenk or Colburn dropping the key and picking it up. It's interesting, guys, that everything is now pointing towards one unit. Law enforcement, crime lab. IDMFL pointing to the crime lab. The key pointing to law enforcement. The hood latch swab pointing to law enforcement, crime lab, right? So it's all and the blood in the RAV pointing to the crime lab or law enforcement. So all of a sudden it's heading in the direction that the state are laughing at Kathleen Zellner, saying, well, you should have actually stuck with the law enforcement aspect. All right. So any comments on that one? All right, Jack 61, shall we do the next one?
It would help if I unmute myself. I was going to throw this photo up just for 1 second, Doc, just as a reminder.
Yes.
Give me just 1 second.
We didn't say law enforcement. We said law enforcement. Must be my Australian accent. Have you got a picture there, Jack 61? You got a picture to put up, Jack 61?
There we go. I don't know why it wouldn't turn on. It was being dumb, but there it is.
There we go. Yep. Yeah, that's the blood near the ignition where we've discussed this ad infinitum. That is just so freaking suspicious. It's just not funny, right? And as you know, Jack 61, 2 people had swabbed that blood near the ignition, Groffy and Sharik O'Hain. So that blood smear has had 3 swabs at it. So it's actually diluted and completely changed the shape of that blood spot near the key. Yeah, crazy stuff. Jack 61.
I mean, just, for me as a layperson, I see a dot here, I see a dot here, and then I see swarp with a Q-tip. I see swarp with a Q-tip. That's what I see. Whether that's right or wrong, correct. That's what and increase that gull wing pattern. We got this gull flying off in the sunset.
Correct. And as Kaf has pointed out in the chat, that blood, I think it was November the 6th when they took that photograph, or the 7th, because that's when Colhane came on board. That blood is like from October the 31st, right? If you believe that Stephen Avery went inside the RAV4 on October 31st, that blood is actually quite old, and you can see that it's actually quite vivid, right? Which tends to suggest that blood is much fresher, right? Do you know what I'm trying to get at here, guys?
Yep.
That the blood was actually added after the fact rather than from October the 31st. Because remember, the state is saying that RAV4 sat in that spot from October 31st to the November the 5th, right? And if Stephen had left his blood, that blood is actually is from October the 31st, but it looks much fresher. Jack 61.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, I'm a layperson, but just looking at the many photographs I've looked at over the years of blood, it looks pretty fresh.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
a very good point. Very
Correct.
good point.
It doesn't look what you would expect, right?
It should look brown. Yeah.
Correct, because it's all dried out and things like that, which is very interesting because the pictures that they showed in court of Teresa Halbach's blood, they changed the contrast to make it more vivid and more red. Because remember how Mr. Kratz said that there were pools of blood in the RAV4? There wasn't. There was only a tiny amount of blood in the RAV4. All right, Jack 61. Who would like to read out point number 4? Susan, would you like to read it out?
I can read it, Doc. It's
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh no, well go
It's
ahead. No, go ahead, Susan, if you're ready.
Susan.
No. Point number 4.
You got it?
Had a convenient stash of unidentified instruments capable of collecting and transporting liquid blood on hand, or what those might have been.
Wow.
You know what that's suggesting to me at Jack 61?
Well, I mean, from a non-scientific standpoint, from my brain is a pipette or I really don't even know how to. I don't even know how to.
Yeah.
It's the wording. Yeah, the wording of that is so weird to me. I don't.
Correct. Basically, you don't need anything sophisticated. You just need a little tube or with a pipette in order to suck up the blood. And like I said, you could even potentially do it using a sponge. If it's wet, you collect the blood, then you drip it. That's it. So
They'd sure have those in the lab, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's a slap in the face. When you read a comment like that, and I'll repeat, had a convenient stash of unidentified instruments capable of collecting and transferring liquid blood on hand, or what those might have been. That's ridiculous, right? So as we discussed before, it doesn't rule Bobby out, right? It doesn't rule Bobby out, but does it rule the crime lab out as well?
No.
No, in actual fact, it actually points to the crime lab, straight to the crime lab. Because the crime lab, remember, Cherie Cohen was a serologist, right? So she knew all about blood, right? They would have done blood works in that place. They had all the convenient materials. And look, trust me, I've gone through probably about 10,000 pipettes. They're small, plastic. They've got a little bulb at the top. They're disposable, piece of cake. All you do is you take an aliquot of the blood, and that's it. You can transport it anywhere you want. No big deal at all. All right, guys. Is there any other comments on that one? That was a pretty straightforward. Jack 61.
Yeah. It's not a pipette, but am I remembering correctly? And I don't remember where it was found out, which pile of whatever. Wasn't there glass slides found in one of those? I'm sure there were. I just can't replace it in my mind right now, or I remember reading it in their, searching some of these various burn piles or whatever. Wasn't there glass slides found?
There could have been, but I'll have to double check it. Jack 61, I have to double check it.
Well, my point being, if somebody wet, moistened blood drops, took a glass slide, got the blood on it, took another moist glass slide, and slapped them together. Now, of course, this is but you got blood, is what I'm saying. That's my point.
Correct. But any small container, anything that has the ability to carry the blood, it's no problems at all, right?
And keep it from drying and keep it from re-drying out.
Keep it from drying. Correct. So, you put it in a little container, you have a little stopper or something like that, it can be done. But to me, the state are actually laughing at Zellner, saying, he doesn't have the sophistication, but guess who does?
Yeah, I mean, she seems. This is yet another again, and the state can do whatever they want in this adversarial, theater. But this is another comment. She seems a little more snarky than she really needs to be. Conveniently.
Oh, correct. 100% correct. All right, Jack 61. If we have no more comments, how about the next one?
I have one more.
Oh, yes.
There's absolutely no proof whatsoever that blood was in that RAV before it got to the lab.
No, that's 100% correct. There's no eyewitness testimony, and there's no photograph. No one said they saw blood in the RAV4. Not even the blood in the back where Teresa was. No one saw, and mind you, Nicole and Pam of God saw the inside of the RAV4. They were able to see the bottles of water. They were able to see other items in the RAV4, so it wasn't dark enough that they couldn't see. No one, including detectives with torches, saw any presence of blood in the RAV4. To me, that's highly suggestive, or opens up the possibility that the blood was added after the RAV4 was taken from the property. Anybody have any comments? Both Pam of God and Nicole were asked extensively, did you see any blood? Did you see any blood? No, none of them did. And the Fassbender was there. They had torches. No one saw any blood. And
Fassbender looked into the RAV after it had been there for how long? 4 hours to see if Teresa's body was in there. I mean, that's the dumbest thing I ever saw.
Yeah. Correct. And then they looked under the RAV, remember? To see if her body was sitting under the Yeah. So no one saw any presence of blood in the RAV. However, I think it was the cadaver dog that did a hit on the outside of the RAV. Now, did the cadaver dog smell Teresa Hallbach's blood, or did the cadaver dog smell A23, or both?
I think both, Doc. I think both.
Yep. Correct. Because a cadaver dog is not specific for Teresa Hallbach. A scent dog is, but a cadaver dog is not. So that's very interesting. And remember what Kratz said, and Tom Fassbender said, the moment the dog gave a hit, we knew it was a homicide. They knew then and then. Oh, yeah? They knew then and then that she was dead because of the smelling of the blood.
Right.
Correct. All right, guys, shall we go to the next one? We're nearly done.
Yep, it's up.
Yep. Who would like to read this one? Cherie, would you like to read this one?
Okay.
Thank you.
Planted the keys to the RAV4 in Avery's trailer unnoticed and at some unspecified time between November 3rd and November 5th, yet also either managed to move the RAV4 off the 40-acre property without the keys or drive it away and return on foot from wherever he supposedly took it, and then sneak into Avery's trailer again to hide the keys at some other unidentified time once again, unnoticed.
All right. Do we have any comments? So, in other words, could Bobby Dassey have done any of this? Jack 61.
Well, certainly hypothetically, absolutely, and she's making this pre-strike here that said Avery had the key. Well, that's not necessarily have to be true at all.
Mm-hmm.
So she's trying to corral everyone to saying, well, Avery already had the key, so Bobby snuck in the trailer and got it, and then moved the RAV, and then moved it again. There's a lot of problems with that statement. Number one, we don't have to believe that Stephen had the key at all. Number two, the phone call, the Sawinski phone call, is a real problem here, right? Because according to him, the doors were open, so that hence therefore says
the key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. They had to have had a key, and they obviously didn't want to start the key because it would have made noise and it would have been highly suspicious. Susan.
It really bothers me that they have keys, plural.
Real sticking point for me too, that they should get it right.
Yep, planted the keys. Yeah, they only found one. But here's the problem: was that Teresa's sub key or her main key? Right, have they found her?
I've always thought that it's possible she misplaced her keys and used her sub key that day. I mean, yeah, that doesn't bother me as much.
Yep.
Although I do think they got that key from her house, but but it's possible she just used one key that day.
Right. So let's go around the table, right? Who could have had a direct access to the keys and the RAV4? Bobby Dassey, Stephen Avery, or law enforcement, or a third party? So in other words, can we absolve totally Bobby Dassey from doing the planting of the key and the RAV4? Just Rhonda.
I am just getting ready to go upstairs to get food because I'm starving, so I want to give my answer. I think the third party option being Ryan Hilligus.
Okay, very, very interesting. Thank you, Just Rhonda. I don't recall who does this point a finger to? Bobby Dassey, Stephen Avery, law enforcement, or third party?
I suppose I think any of them could have done it because growing up on a salvage yard, I know my brothers could hot wire a car, to get it started, so they wouldn't necessarily need the key, but also, if the key was with it, any of them could have done it, whoever, law enforcement or Stephen or Bobby or somebody else, That's my opinion.
But if Tom Sawinski's observation is correct, that he directly saw Bobby Dassey pushing the RAV with another person, who does that tend to put the spotlight on now?
Bobby.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Susan, what about yourself?
Well, first of all, I think it's ridiculous that they would think that Bobby would first plant the keys and then move the RAV. If he had the keys, he's going to drive the freaking RAV somewhere. I mean, it's so stupid how they wrote this. But, I mean, correct. Yes, it is possible that he could have done that.
Okay, very good point. What about you, Jack 61?
Yeah, I'm right there with Susan. I think in the hypothetical, absolutely he could have done it, but I also think it's really, again, this is another one of those points that the way it's written, it comes off, it rubs me, I guess, the wrong way in what she's trying to say. You get it. I know you get it, Doc. But in the hypothetical, absolutely, he could have done it. So could the cops. It's just that simple.
Correct. So it's the way I see it, it is a possibility that Bobby did this, but it also points to either a third party or law enforcement. No, and to answer someone in chat, no, they didn't find her house keys, as far as I'm aware. They haven't found her office keys, so there's a bunch of keys which are missing. I believe they'd never found her Hasselblad camera either. So there are items which are missing as far as I'm aware. Correct.
Well,
correct.
And also there's no no car insurance or car registration inside the RAV, which you're supposed to keep in the vehicle. Gone. Nothing there. Her purse, gone.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we know that her Hasselblad wasn't either at her house or at her office?
I don't think we know that for sure, but I would. I mean, it could have been, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe she because it is an expensive camera, so she might not have taken it on the road, to do these photo shoots. So.
Correct.
And I've never seen it mentioned in any report or anywhere. It just may be a moot point.
Yeah, interesting. All right, then. Do we have any additional comments to that one? All right, so potentially it could have been Bobby, but unlikely. However, it does bring Bobby into play if what Tom Sawinski observed is indeed correct. Very interesting. All right, Jack 61, can we have point number 6? All right, who would like to read this one out? Jack 61, would you like to read it out?
Yep, I can, Doc. 1 second. Okay, number 6. Found and then planted a tiny mangled bullet fragment that Bobby inexplicably knew had the victim's DNA on it underneath items in Avery's garage, or alternatively, how he shot the victim in Avery's garage on October 31, and then at another unidentified time scrubbed the scene with Avery remaining unaware. This despite Avery indisputably having been working on his Suzuki and other vehicles in and around the garage around this time. Oh my God. This is...
Can you believe what the state have just now done? The state have now just absolved Stephen Avery having to do with anything to do with Teresa.
Of course.
Right, because they're saying, how could Bobby have done this? Yet they're now saying that they were saying, well, Stephen obviously had to have done it. But now they're saying, wait a minute, how could Bobby have cleaned up all the garage if Stephen was working on the Suzuki, etc., etc.? And they couldn't have cleaned up the garage because they still found Stephen's blood and DNA in the garage, but not Teresa Hallbach, right? And as we've discussed before, item FL is bogus. It's bogus and bullshit. You can completely... This is an argument that's got no... It's a straw man argument. It's got no merit. What do you think, guys?
Well, it's another one of those things, Doc, that it fell out of the sky. It's like, November 8th, 2005. Shit just fell out everywhere for me. The stars lined up. And again,
correct.
This bullet, after shaking Brendan's tree, this bullet fell out. What? They've been in that garage probably at least 5 or 6 times way back in November of 2005, and they didn't find it. And they moved. Well, I'm not gonna say they moved everything, but they moved pretty much everything out of that garage, and that bullet wasn't there. I'm sorry.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
So who is this pointing? Sorry, Susan.
Okay, the first sentence here, it makes absolutely no sense. They're saying that Bobby if he planted a tiny mangled bullet fragment that inexplicably knew had the victim's DNA on it underneath items in Avery's garage. What?
Yes.
Yeah. If he did this, okay, he took the bullet. The bullet wasn't underneath the whatchamacallit.
The compressor.
He put it there. It wasn't underneath it already. This makes no sense.
Oh, you know what? This is an embedded confession.
Uh-huh.
This is saying this is an embedded confession.
That's
They're
exactly
saying
what it is. Yeah.
this is saying this is how the state did it. This is how the state did it, which is completely crazy, right? So they're saying, hey, wait a minute. Bobby Dassey couldn't have done this. Oh, but Stephen did. Oh, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Jack 61.
Right. One can't do it, but the other one can. What?
That's correct. That's 100% correct. And that Suzuki and the snowmobile, that's a big problem for the state, because the state want the Suzuki out of the garage. Because remember what Brendan said? He goes, oh, we backed up Teresa Horbach's RAV4 in the garage. You can't do that if there's a Suzuki and a snowmobile, right? So if there's a Suzuki in there, you can't drive the RAV4 in, right? You can't put Teresa Horbach in her RAV4 because there's no room, right? So, and plus, look what was on the Suzuki. All that dust, objects. Are you trying to tell me that Stephen pulled the Suzuki out and the snowmobile, drove in the RAV4, killed Teresa Horbach, put her in the RAV4, and then said, oh, we're going to cremate Teresa, so we need to dismember her, and then carry all that out, and then bring in the Suzuki and the snowmobile, and then drive the RAV4 to the pit. What?
It's nuts. Well,
And
it's
then say that garage was scrubbed.
Yeah.
Give me a break. Give me a freaking break.
Well, the luminol. I mean, later on, when they luminoled the garage, that would have shown signs of scrubbing and mopping. We've seen these photos before. The luminol would have shown that.
Correct. To disguise it, basically to disguise it. But the problem is, guys, there are car products that give a positive luminol result.
Yes.
Like the transmission oil and other components will give a positive result to luminol. So these guys are going, oh, wow, it's positive to luminol. Wait a minute, what does Stephen Avery do? Oh, he works on cars and breaks them down. Right? So that you would expect that result.
Well, even, correct me if I'm wrong, Doc, but, even changing motor oil, transmission fluid, that kind of thing, contains small metal flakes and so forth, shavings. Correct. And luminol would likely ignite on that, right? It would light up. Correct.
So it was non-specific. They needed to have done a presumptive test for blood and prove that it was blood. They never did. They never could find Teresa Horbach's blood in that RAV4, right? Which BB said they must have used a bulletproof tarp, right?
You just said they never could find her blood in the RAV4, Doc.
Yeah.
You mean in the garage?
In the garage.
Yeah, he meant in the garage.
Yeah.
Yes, they definitely found her blood in the RAV4. Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have any other comment? It's just so completely bizarre, right?
It is bizarre. It's so poorly written.
Yes, but in a way, what they're doing is they're saying, nah, can't be Bobby, right, for the following reasons. But Jesus, this looks really suspicious that it's the crime lab and law enforcement which are involved. And then they have the nerve to laugh at Kathleen Zellner and say, you should have stuck with the planting scenario with law enforcement. Because law enforcement are the ones finding all the evidence. Law enforcement
way more plausible. Yeah.
Yes, it's a more plausible scenario. All right. Anybody have any other comments? All right. Jack 61, we're nearly done. We've got 2 more, I believe. All right. Who would like to read this one out?
I'll read it.
Just Rhonda. Beautiful. Let's go for it.
Okay. Item 7, burned the victim's body in some undisclosed location and then moved the remains to Avery's burn pit again, completely undetected, and did it so thoroughly as to include, quote, at least a fragment or more of almost every bone below the neck, end quote, in the entire human skeleton, along with the rivets from her jeans, nor has Avery provided any facts showing where and when this occurred.
All right. Now, does this completely absolve Bobby?
No.
No, none of it does. None of it
No,
completely absolved Bobby or anybody else for that matter, honestly.
no. And here's the problem. What would have happened if someone accused him of being the murderer by saying, you realize that there were human cremains, burnt cremains in your burn barrel, Bobby? How do you explain that? Now, the state explained it by saying Stephen did it, but what would have happened if Bobby was challenged by it? Susan?
It would have been suspicious.
Yeah, it would have been highly suspicious. And notice how they said, oh, a representative of every bone in the body. They never found one bone intact. They only found fragments.
The way they said, and did it so thoroughly as to include, are they trying to say that he picked and chose the fragments that he put in there?
He
Come
handpicked it.
on. This is written so poorly.
Yeah. So, according to the state, he handpicked a femur, handpicked a small bone, handpicked a bit of a rib, a piece
almost every bone.
Just to make everyone happy, a piece on it. Whereas Eisenberg couldn't tell between a long bone where it had come from, an arm or a leg, because the long bones, they're very, very identical. And the problem is there was never one whole bone. There were fragments, which meant that there wasn't 10 pieces of a rib. They found a piece of a rib. Where the hell did the rest of the skeleton go? Where are the crowns of the teeth? Where's the rest of the skull? It's crazy. So does this completely absolve Bobby? I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't. No. And in fact, if you think about barrel number 2, it could implicate him. Now again, this is on the hypothetical, so I want everybody to keep that in mind. But if you include barrel number 2, there is some implication there. No matter what the state says, the state's saying they're going to say anything they can to protect themselves and to justify why those cut partial fragments were in that barrel. But they can't prove that.
I would also like to point out once again that there are no in situ photos. So
no, they're not.
There is no factual data that says that stuff was even there.
Correct.
The bones were even there.
And the embarrassing thing is, and I know it's insensitive, but if you burn a human being in one spot, you expect to find 100% of the skeletal remains in the one spot, right? You can't dispute that. And if you want to hide your crime, you don't just pick up 4 pieces of bone and decide to drop them off in your underburn barrel number 2. You scrape up all the cremains, you put them in a bucket or buckets, and you dispose of the buckets. You remove all proof that you've cremated someone, right, guys? You don't leave a little bit here and a little bit there, right?
Absolutely.
And you don't throw cremains in the grass, right?
And it was a tiny burn pit. It wouldn't be that hard to scrape it all up and
that's
throw
100%
it out.
correct. Yeah, and so if the state were able to do it in record time, sift the cremains and put them in a box, well, then Stephen Avery obviously had time to get the ash, put it in a couple of buckets, and either toss them in a river or bury them somewhere. No one would have found them, right? So he left all the cryptic clues in the burn pit, yet there was no evidence that Teresa Horbuck was in the garage apart from item FL, which is bogus. and he was able to clean up a dismemberment. Now, we know that Bobby had a deer dismembered in his garage. Did you remember all the blood that you saw? It was everywhere. And yet you don't find any of Teresa's blood anywhere in that garage. So it's a mystery. So to me, it doesn't absolve Bobby, but it's the crime scene is weird because you would have expected all the skeletal remains to be in one spot. And now you've got the complexity of human cut burn remains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, which makes the whole scenario bizarre. And Cuss Road. What was found at Cuss Road? Susan.
That last line, nor has Avery provided any facts showing where or this occurred. Well, they didn't show that for Stephen either.
That's correct. That is 100% correct. So, if you're blaming Bobby, what leniency you give to Bobby, you must also give to Stephen, right? Because Stephen's saying, I never did any of this. I couldn't have done any of this. And the examination of the crime scene proves that there's something bizarre going on. Jack 61, do you want to comment on that picture?
Well, I just wanted to pop it on there to just, kind of show, this is a kind of a half-ass in situ that does not show no pile of ash and all the bullshit that was described in the reports. Again, Susan nailed it. Christina has said it many times. If you write a report, you should be able to document or have documentation, as in photographs or a video showing what you're talking about when you can. And they didn't. So they could write whatever they want.
Just Rhonda.
Okay, I have a couple things from the chat. Keith Barnum, aka Daywalker, is saying a very big hello to everybody.
Awesome. Welcome.
He says it's been a few years, but he's back. And then
awesome.
Let's see, there was a comment. Oh, did I miss it? Oh, and then West Virginia popped in. Hello, West Virginia. And said, I know this comment is late, but I passed out and landed on my face. I broke my nose, blood everywhere. The blood was still there over 24 hours later. It was gelled. So yeah. I think that's in reference to how blood changes over time.
Yes, correct. There's a lot of things which are suspicious about the blood works in this case. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I mean, the whole crime scene should have been properly documented. The burn pit should have been documented properly. The cremain should have been documented properly. There should have been a forensic anthropologist and also a coroner on scene. There wasn't. And like I said, if you're the state, you can control the narrative of what you find and don't find. Correct, guys? You control the narrative. You control the outcome. You control the story. Right, guys? There you go. There's no pictures, no in situ photos of the bones, cremains, no grid, nothing. We just have to rely on their integrity and honesty. All right, guys. So are there any other questions? So in terms of the cremains, right? Bobby, Stephen, law enforcement, or a third party? What do you reckon? I don't recall. Can you completely absolve Bobby?
No, but I would probably more likely law enforcement were involved.
Okay, interesting. Susan?
Well, I think if there were, in fact, bones in that burn pit, that it's more likely that someone brought them in. And that could have been either Bobby or law enforcement. I think it was law enforcement, but yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Jack 61.
Oh, I think, you know what I think, Doc. I think they found the Bonanza pile over at Cuss Road. They were moved and were found in air quotes, on November 8th, and they put a bow on it without any photographs. That's what I think. Law enforcement.
Yes. Correct. Just Rhonda, what do you think?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? I got distracted.
In terms of the cremains, who is likely the person that put them there? Bobby, Stephen, law enforcement, or a third party?
I would have to say law enforcement as part of the cover-up.
Yeah. So it's rather remarkable. All the factors that we've been looking at, the number one entity that keeps on popping up is not Bobby, is not Stephen, but in actual fact law enforcement on most of these, which is truly unbelievable. All right, guys, can we do the last point? Now, this one here is a real head scratcher, this one. Who would like to read that one out? Jack 61, would you like to read that one out?
Yeah, I'll read the last one. Number 8, convinced his younger brother Brendan to go along with this plan and fabricate a confession implicating himself and Avery, or why Brendan would do so. Oh boy.
Who would like to comment that one? So, in other words, it's okay for Stephen to have convinced Brendan, but it's not okay that Bobby Dassey could have convinced Brendan. Susan?
This one's easy. Brendan was coerced.
Yep, 100% agree.
Period.
Yep, 100% agree. Just Rhonda, what about yourself?
Well, I agree with Susan, of course, but that's about the stupidest thing in the whole reply. That's just ridiculous. That's just it's kind of like I don't know, goading or condescending, or
That's exactly what it is.
Egging her on something. It's just it's there's nothing organic about that part. Nothing.
But look how ridiculous it is, right? What did bloody Fallon say in court, right? That Brendan wanted to know what sex was all about. That's why he did it, right? So let's get this straight, right? So imagine this crazy scenario where Stephen, who was very sympathetic for the boys, argued with his sister about the boys, going to amount to nothing. And now you're trying to tell me that Stephen convinced Brendan Dassey, his 16-year-old nephew, right, to commit rape, murder, torture, dismemberment, cremation, and say, thanks, Brendan, good job. You can go to school tomorrow. You're not going to tell anybody, are you? This is not going to affect you psychologically for the rest of your life. Nah, didn't think so. Good on you. Well done. That's exactly what they said in court, Jack 61, correct? That's right. What they said.
Yeah. And I think about, Comfort's making this statement here. And then I think about this whole coerced confession on March 1st. Goes through all that and it's to all this horrific horse shit. And then Brendan says, hey, am I going to be here much longer? I got a project to turn in. What? Correct. I got to be back at 1:30 for this project, 6th period. When can I go? What?
Correct. So, and as people have said in chat, he was hands-on, allegedly, hands-on with Teresa Halbach. What he did to Teresa Halbach, he should have had DNA forensic evidence everywhere. Do you agree, guys? He would have left forensic evidence absolutely everywhere. If Teresa Halbach was in that room, there would have been her forensic evidence everywhere, no matter how much the boys cleaned up. All they needed was one speck, and that's it, party over. There was no forensic evidence against Brendan Dassey. right?
Yeah.
And so they'd have come up with that ridiculous scenario saying, good job, Brendan, well done. And this is from an uncle who argued with his sister about the boys getting things done in life, and he now just destroyed his nephew. That's what we're meant to believe. Check 61.
Yeah, not to be crass, but you were talking about this statement that Fallon made. He wanted to know what it was like. You're not telling, and because Brendan says he didn't finish. He's first time 16 years old. No. This is opinion. I can't prove anything. If this had happened in like real time, the boy would have finished, and there would probably have been there would have the potential for DNA on that bed would have been skyrocketing
everywhere.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely
And
everywhere.
why wouldn't the state say that Brendan helped Bobby?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And yet these dickheads they're the ones that are suggesting, hey, that's what Stephen did. But it can't apply to Bobby.
It was a fabricated confession, is what they're saying.
Correct. So what they're saying, it's another embedded confession. They're saying, yeah, we fabricated a confession out of Brendan. Boy, we did a good job, didn't we, guys? There you go. They're telling you right there, right? To fabricate a confession. It's crazy. So, again, these are the 8 points that they argued, right? But to me, it's highly suggestive that, yeah, Bobby could have done some of these things, possibly, can't rule them out. But God damn it, the state just put the spotlight on themselves. The state is saying, you want all this shit to go down and keep it quiet? Yeah, we could do it. Crime lab, law enforcement, no problems. And as we've said before, Jack 61, in one of our readings with the crew, 2 important people never took the stand. That was Bushman and that was Deidring, right? Bushman, search team A at Cuss Road. He's not on the stand. And Deidring, he's a Mr. Everywhere man. He's not on the stand, right? Again, crazy stuff. Well, look, guys, that was phenomenal. And again, I think we brought a good balance to the discussion, and I think it was a really good and fair analysis. We never ruled anybody in, we never ruled anybody out. We just looked at what the state put forward. Now, Jack 61, that's all I've got. What else have we got?
Yeah, we've got the summary that Cherie wrote, and this is her takeaway, from her legal reading and or being a legal person. This is her takeaway from the state's reply. So if everybody's good, I'm going to go ahead and pop that on the screen, and we can start going through it. Now, this is Cherie's work. She's more than welcome to read, or if she wants, one of us others to read it, and we can talk about each point as we go through. I'm okay with that too. So I'm going to get it up, and we can get started here. Give me just 1 second, guys.
I just want to say that I'm encouraged that Casey called this an early Christmas present. Can't wait for her reply.
Where are we at here? Okay.
Me too, and hearing having Dr. Silkman break it down like that, you can really see the idiocy of it, I guess.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So,
and we never even talked about Sawinski either, which is interesting. Thank you, Jack 61.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't. I mean, to me, this is the crux. And we'll talk more about, like I said earlier, I don't want to, we need to get through this other before I say what my spiel about Sawinski, but we'll get to it, I promise. But this is Cherie's summary. Now, Cherie, do you want one of us to read, or you want to start off and then maybe pass it around? It's entirely up to you.
I'll take a turn. You want me to start now?
Whenever you're ready. You read just you go ahead and start, and if we may interrupt you and pause at a certain point and discuss. So you just go ahead and start, and we'll go from there.
Avery did not meet the first Denny prong motive because he did not show that Bobby was the only one with access to the PC, or that what was found on the PC established motive for commission of the crime. Avery did not meet the second Denny prong opportunity because although Bobby may have had access to the crime scene, Avery did not show that Bobby had the skills, tools, and time to carry out the series of difficult, complicated tasks necessary to commit the murder, clean up the mess, and frame Avery.
Let's pause right there just for a second before we get too deep into your, covering the motive aspect, and this is another one of those things that it's another crux of the Denny, whether we like it or not. A motive is the prosecution. The state does not have to prove motive; they don't have to provide one. While as if you suggest a Denny suspect, if the defendant has the audacity, he's got to provide a motive as to why this person will do it. And basically, they're saying law enforcement in the state is right, and you're wrong if you don't provide a motive for some other person, which to me, it's just complete arrogance. It's total arrogance. I don't know if anyone has to comment about that or not. And before I move to the next.
Yeah.
Okay, well then the second prong, opportunity. Now, as we read through the various points that in the prior slides, again, this is hypothetical. I'm not accusing Bobby of anything, but there was opportunity. Now, the state's trying to drive us down a narrow path of how this commission of this crime could have happened. And we do, but we don't have to follow their path. Because clearly, shit happened. We still don't know exactly what happened, and they don't either. As far as we know, at least from what we've been presented with, they don't. They right, Doc?
Right. Yep, no idea. They got no idea.
So, there is that potential from a hypothetical sense. I don't think it was Bobby personally. And my pick is if of any one of the characters that we know about is Ryan, but it definitely could have been a third party. There's no doubt about it. That's unnamed. But anyway, so if anybody has any comments about that, then they go ahead. But then if not, Sheree can continue with the third. Well, good. All right, Sheree, continue.
Avery did not meet the third Denny prong direct connection because Avery did not show a connection between Bobby and the perpetration of the crime. Access to the RAB does not mean Bobby killed Teresa Halbach. Should I keep going?
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, how much rope is the state willing to give to Bobby Dassey? I mean, this is mind-blowing, right? Everyone would say, wait a minute, what the hell's Bobby Dassey got his hands on the RAV4, the victim's vehicle, right? Pushing it onto the Avery salvage yard. You would think that would have been a big deal. But the state are going, nah, no problems. No problem. If you don't show a direct connection to the murder, the state don't care about it.
What it made me think of is look at the big deal they made when Pam found the RAV, they didn't even though Teresa was only missing at that point, it was a done deal, it almost seemed like, so.
Yes.
But here, the connection to the RAV means nothing,
No,
well,
nothing.
sure, they descended on the Avery property, remember? How many cops showed up there within a matter of 20 minutes? It was a madhouse. And that wasn't, you brought up a good point, Doc, and I don't have it pulled up. I mean, we could probably find it, but they made she made such a light issue. So what if he had, he was pushing the rabbit? That didn't mean he killed her. What?
That's correct. That's correct. So, with Stephen, they're saying that he had a direct connection with the RAV4 because he went in it, drove it, brought it down to the pit, right? But the same scrutiny is not put on Bobby Dassey. So here we have the same day where the RAV4 is found by Pam McGod, you got Bobby Dassey and the other guy pushing it. No problems. No problems.
It's really hypocritical to me, and I'm really surprised that it. I mean, the way, even if she wrote that in the hypothetical, it's still to me that's just a place they should have never went, because that again, as you said, it opens the door up to saying, hey, it's fine if he was pushing it, so what? Well, that means if Sawinski says the doors were open, well, that tells me they've got the keys, because somebody had to be steering the damn thing. They couldn't have picked it up. So that means that the steering wheel was unlocked. So that means they had a key. That's a huge fucking deal. I'm sorry, it's accessory after the fact. Again, I'm not saying Bobby did that at all. I'm not. I'm just saying, from the state standpoint, if that had been Avery, game over. We wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So.
Correct.
All right, Sheree, you can continue.
Avery is not. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Avery is not entitled to an evidentiary hearing on the newly discovered evidence of Tom Sawinski's sighting of Bobby pushing the RAV and his call to dispatch reporting the sighting, because even with the new evidence, Avery would not be able to meet the Denny prongs needed to present the evidence, and because even if he did, a jury would not have reasonable doubt of Avery's guilt in light of all the other overwhelming evidence.
This is another statement I have a real problem with, because she said this a number of times throughout her reply. Personally, if this had been presented to the jury, I think it would have thrown big problems for the prosecution.
In 2007,
yeah.
Imagine bringing up the pornography. Yes, I know now we have a different perspective. But back in 2007, in the trial, if you bring up the pornography, right, and you bring up Tom Sawinski, man, oh man, I'm telling you, he's trying to say there's no reasonable doubt. You got to be kidding me.
I think it would have created a huge problem for the jury, and the state would have had to have done something, had another, a big event, some kind of big stroke to have countered this. I think the jury would have said, no, wait a minute. This paper route guy, he's saying that he saw Bobby, even if it was a third party and Bobby wasn't even involved. It doesn't matter. Anyone else touching that RAV and pushing it, and I think that would have made a big problem for them. Big problem.
Yeah, and imagine if Ramlow's observation was made in 2007 during the court trial. Oh, so somebody did independently see the RAV4 off the property, and Bobby was pushing it back onto the property?
That's right.
Oh, shit. Yeah, there you go.
Go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry.
I'm saying they're basically diffusing the importance of Bobby Dassey, because even though in the filing, in the response, they said, star witness, what are you talking about, star witness? They even reduced it, because Bobby just said he saw Teresa walking towards a trailer. Are you trying to tell me that now is not a powerful element used by the court to nail Stephen? They're now diffusing that. What the hell, guys?
That's right. What's it going to take? I guess next it's going to be, it was Avery's fault that Bobby was pushing it. And this was part of a discussion we had with reading with the crew, that this position that Bobby found himself in, again, we're unknowing because so much is has been kept from us. But again, thinking about in real time, how was Bobby treated when the recorder was off? And I just know and listen. Yeah, right, Doc. I mean, listening to Dettering, listen to Dettering how he talked to Bobby, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was Neville that said Diedring had his coulones in a vice and was squeezing them. That's exactly what it'd been like. It was bad. It would have been really bad.
Well, yeah, for an 18 or 19-year-old kid, even if he was street smart. So, was it running through his mind, or was the words said, play ball, or you're going to be a co-defendant? I don't know. We don't know that. Or a co-conspirator, absolutely. And instead of his brother later getting yanked into it, it would have been him.
Yes. Well, there's no doubt. Look, there's no doubt. I think you're correct. They were probably working on, okay, let's nail them both. Until Brendan walked into it. And now they started going, wait a minute, how the hell did Brendan get involved? Right? And the reason is because remember what Skolinski said to him in that interview. Hey, you were at the fire. Don't try and tell me you didn't see any body parts. Of course you did. But of course he had no evidence. So Skolinski back then, right early on, I think it was November the 10th, he was extremely suspicious because their mantra was Stephen killed Teresa Halbach. Stephen burnt Teresa Halbach. Oh, Brendan, you just admitted helping your uncle tend to the fire. Well, then you were there. You're either an observer or a participant. Which one is it? And then, of course, Brendan nailed himself. Boom, done.
That's right. Okay, Sheree, continue.
Avery's claim that the prosecution did not turn over Tom Sawinski's call to dispatch does not constitute a Brady violation because the prosecution is not required to turn over evidence that is only potentially exculpatory that could form the basis for further investigation.
That's a I guess this is really more of a question maybe that you can field and talk about, or if you have an opinion. And we'll get more into this call. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it after we're done with the summary. But this call was held until earlier this year, and then suddenly it appears. What are your thoughts about this?
I'd have to do a little more research on the Wisconsin law, but I don't know. I think that's not just a little thing. That's a big thing. It's it's more than just, oh, maybe we should look at this. They definitely would have, and it very well could have been exculpatory.
Well, in the Nick Hillary case, the judge dismissed it because the state withheld exculpatory evidence. Remember, Jack 61? the case got thrown out.
That's exactly right.
Well, that was that other guy that said he saw. Was it John?
Walk into the building. Yeah, John Jones walk into the building. It wasn't him, but that's not the point. The point is, it wasn't an African American who walked into the building. It was a white guy.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and that kind of parallels this evidence, in my opinion. It's the same along the same lines. So.
But
I agree.
Did you hear what they called it? Potentially exculpatory. Or why didn't you test it in court, you goose? What did you withhold it for? And they did.
What I've learned was that it's anything that would make the prosecutor go, uh-oh, or whoops, that makes them feel that way is something they should turn over.
Well, you cannot get anything more direct, right, Jack 61? I saw Bobby Dassey and Santa with their hands on the victim's vehicle on November the 5th before it was found.
Even in 2005, and again, I'm going to get a little bit more on this call before we wrap up today. Even in that call, if Sowinski had just said, I saw a couple of guys, a younger guy with his shirt off and an older man pushing this RAV on the Avery salvage yard, and not necessarily naming anyone. Again, while it's for Denny purposes, that's it's important, but it is really kind of irrelevant because that means somebody else had that RAV and had their hands on it and had a key, the doors were open. It's huge. It's a huge thing. To me, it is.
Yes. Can I just make a quick comment? I've had the chat on and off. I've got Keith Barnum. Look, just come into Discord, Keith, and discuss what you were talking about here in chat. Just come to Discord and discuss it there, because that way we can discuss it rather than in chat. And yes, I do remember a day walk, but we're talking about years ago. So come into Discord, talk about your hypothesis, but let's keep focused here because this is very, very important. Jack 61. Daywalker, yes, I remember.
Yeah, I remember Daywalker. It's been a few years, but absolutely.
Yeah, a long time. Yeah, just come into Discord.
Absolutely. So if there's nothing else, Cherie, please continue.
Avery's claim that the prosecution's alleged withholding of the Kevin Ramlow report was a Brady violation is false because the report cannot be true since Colburn was not working that day, the day that Ramlow says he reported the alleged RAV sighting. Well, there you go.
Well, yeah, Colburn says he was off that day, so it can be true. So therefore, Kevin Ramlow is lying. I will say this. I'll say this, Doc, and then I'll let you go. Calf brought up a good point a few minutes ago, and this is about eyewitness identification, and it can be awful. We've seen so many cases where eyewitnesses were wrong; they were way off base because our brain is not like a VCR or whatever, and the interpretation gets really screwed up at times. At the same time, there was another officer, and I swear I can't remember his name. Maybe somebody in the live or somebody here can remember. That kind of looked like he could have mistaken this guy for Colburn after he saw the docuseries and called him that. I don't know, but just to outright call Ramlow a liar, just because Colburn wasn't working that day, so it couldn't have been him. I don't like it. Go
ahead. Yes. I'm trying to find the gentleman's name. There was another officer that looked very much like Colburn, but we're missing the point. The point is that Ramlow went into the Senex station and said, "Hey, officer, I've seen the victim's vehicle just up the road." That's the important point, not the fact that he could have mistaken it for Colburn. But the point is no report was written to say, yes, someone did come up to me and said that they saw the victim's vehicle, because there's no report of it. So is that a Brady violation? The stupid thing is this, right? Why do you put out a missing persons poster in the first place? You put out a missing persons poster in the first place in the hope that you see the missing person or her effects, correct?
That's right.
So that somebody saw her. Yeah.
So you have a member of the public that comes in and says, I think I just saw her car. It's just up the road. Doesn't that constitute better write a report and better check it? Are you going to now completely ignore it?
Well, they'd like to bury it. They're not seeking the truth. They're trying to bury the truth. And you're right. even if it wasn't Coburn that Ramlo thought it was, he's saying, "Hey, I talked to a Manitowoc County cop and told him I saw this thing up here at the bridge or wherever the hell it was."
Correct.
We have a question. Tawanda asked, was Coburn driving his police car on his day off? And I will tell you from my knowledge, somebody else can comment if they want, but I know that oftentimes, not always necessarily, that these cops did drive their patrol car home.
Yes.
I'll tell you what I'd like to know. Exactly how many people did call MTSO and report that RAB by the dam there? We have no calls from the fort.
Well, we've got we do no tip calls. We've got the only ones that we're able to get finally were when Wiegert called Link to get the GPS coordinates
early that morning, right?
Yeah, because they were going to go up, but that was on the 4th, and Coburn sent out
nothing
Joss.
Else.
No, nothing else
all day, and that supposedly that RAB was sitting there.
And no radio transmissions at all. No radio transmissions at all from the 4th. None. Okay. Anyone else? I was trying to look here in the chat to see if anyone could remember that other officer's name, and I can't remember it. It's been a couple of months since I remember reading that. So, okay.
Seems like it might have been Graves or Gray or something. That's what's coming to my mind, but I don't know.
Something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. All right. Anyway, your last point there, Sheree. You're almost done.
Finally, Avery's claim that the circuit court could grant a new trial in the interest of justice by requesting it in this Wisconsin statute 97406 motion is false because the request can only be made in a defendant's Wisconsin statute 97402 motion on direct appeal.
That's a legal thing, and I would have to defer to you, Sheree.
Well, it's a Wisconsin law, and I think it's pretty much like what Tracy said the other night, that the state is right about that. But that's the only time you can do that, file that particular motion in the interest of justice, or claim that, or ask for a new trial.
With the words "in the interest of justice."
Right. Yes. So I don't know if they could do it another way, but not that way apparently.
Fair enough. Well, I think that was a really excellent summary. It hit a lot of the highlights, and thank you for doing that. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
So, with that said, let me get this up the screen here. Give me just 1 second, guys. Okay. With that said, I'm going to talk about the Sowinski call itself, because this is a basis for a lot of what we're dealing with in the overall the call. And to me, you have to break it down and look at overall, how did law enforcement and the state treat the defense lawyers? And I'm going all the way back to Loy and Williams, or Johnson, whoever the guy was. It was his partner. And then the case.
Sorry, the officer's name is Gilbert.
Gilbert. There we go.
At the Senex, and that was actually said by Ken Kratz in his book. And Gilbert, on inspection, does look similar to Colburn.
He does. He does favor him.
Very, very similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, looking at, talking about Ramlo, if it was Gilbert and, he misidentified him. It's kind of important. But at the same time, if Ramlo's swearing, hey, I told the cop, like, fucking RAV was down the road there and he didn't do anything. It was off the property. That's a big deal.
Sure is. Yes.
And I'm like Susan. I want to know how many tips. Here's another thing about and we're going to play the Sawinski call. It's very short. We played it before. We're going to do it again. But November 6th, clearly, Calumet was lead investigation and a number of calls. And you can listen. Everything's posted in the library. These calls got fielded and they were transferred over to Calumet to take the tip because they were the lead. Yet Sawinski's call was not. Not every call was transferred, but a lot of them were. What was the criteria that made them say one way or the other? I can't answer that. I found that curious. But looking at the overall, again, getting the material, the CDs themselves, the calls, and we know that the hell that Rookie and others have went through to try to secure all the calls and radio transmissions from Manitowoc. And people can, the state can bellyache and whine all they want, but the fact is they withheld it. Now, my personal experience after the fact, of course, there is a ledger entry. I can't tell you, I can't remember the date. I could probably find it, but there's a ledger entry where I think it says Manitowoc radio traffic or something to that effect. And these were CDs that were turned in. Well, I requested them and I got 33. Well, we know that there's 35. The other two CDs, they were labeled. One was labeled Halbach Investigation or Halbach Discovery Telco. The other one was labeled Halbach Discovery Radio. So these were radio calls, telephone calls. All these were turned over to Calumet. However, when I know that Rookie was the first one to try to get the bulk of these calls, and he got, this is when Larry Levana was at the MTSO, he got 13 CDs originally. And it was a brick wall. And then, finally, Zellner was able to get, the balance of these CDs earlier this year. And in that, we found the Sawinski call itself. Was it a Brady violation? Well, I don't know. But, when you withhold that many, you got what, 22 or 23, at least, I guess 22 CDs for that many years. And finally, we found them. Well, what the hell, man? I mean, we're talking 17 years. It smacks of corruption to me. And that's my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's the way it comes across. So with that said, now, is there any comments before I continue on?
It's just another example of the state diffusing everything. Anything that can cause harm to them or harm to Bobby per se. It's remarkable how now with Tom Sawinski, I reckon that they know. They got to know about Tom Sawinski. And they probably know what he said to Seglob. But they're trying to say, hey, look, even if it's true, it's not a Brady violation. We didn't know it was exculpatory. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and herein runs another problem because, on November 6th, remember that we have other calls from the 5th where Bobby's name is already being brought up and talked about in some capacity. We obviously, we don't know the complete details because we've talked about this several months ago in another open mic or some other discussion that could have happened on Reading with the Crew. But regardless, his name was being talked about. Again, I'm not saying Bobby did a damn thing, but his name was being brought forward. So, this call comes in. I'm going to play it. As you can see, total, it's 1 minute and 15 seconds. I want to remind everyone, we do not have and have never had the second part of this call. I don't care what anyone tells you out there in the world. We don't have it. We've never had it. I don't know what they think they heard, but if anyone tells you that, you make them provide the call. because we've never had it. I promise you, if we did, you'd be hearing it. We would love to know what the conversation was between Sawinski and Singlove. So anyway, I'm going to play this call. It's a minute, a little over a minute. Anyone here in Discord will have to unmute YouTube for a minute. So here we go.
Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, this is Carla. Can I help you?
I don't know if it's good information, bad information. Who do I talk to about this, the girl that's missing from Hilbert?
I can have you speak with my shift commander. Can you hold on a moment?
Thank you.
Sure. Hang on, I'm going to transfer to the shift commander. You'll be speaking with Sergeant Singlove, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Scott, when I hang up, it's a man on the phone who thinks he has some maybe more leads, and you want to speak with somebody on the case.
All right, good.
All right. And as you heard, now I'm going to add this to the this whole mix. Years after the fact, I can't remember the lady's name, but the ex-girlfriend of Sawinski said, yes, that's his voice. She's given a sworn affidavit to Zellner and says, I remember I was either there or Tom told me about, calling and this incident back then. I remember it clearly. Now, she's an ex, so for her to come forward at this point and say that, it does give it some teeth. It's not a full, saying that, we have another part of this call. We have no idea what they talked about, only in what Sawinski is swearing that he told and passed on this information. So for this to have been withheld this long, personally, I don't think they would have ever meant to let this out. But, I don't know. Maybe just thought that no one would recognize it. I don't know. But to me, this is the basis, and it's a huge deal because you have his girlfriend saying this was him calling. And I know his story has altered and changed, and there are issues with it. I get it. I do. At the same time, for me, this is just me. Even if it wasn't Bobby and some older man, it doesn't matter. If it was, I know he's named Bobby, but if it was somebody and somebody pushing that RAV, I don't give a shit who they are. That's a huge problem for the state. I don't care who they are. So, comments? Thoughts?
Well, first of all, they were stirring Zellner up. You've got no proof. You got no proof. And then all of a sudden the call comes out and they're going, holy shit, there is proof. And his ex-girlfriend can vouch for who he is. So now they're saying, jeepers, okay, let's pretend that it's true. Do we actually care? Nah, no problems. Stephen made him do it.
Yeah, and and to the fact, even if it wasn't the hypothetical, the state's saying, so what? So what if it was Bobby? He wasn't. He didn't prove he killed Teresa.
Correct.
So anyway, I thought I would add this into the mix because in discussing this, being the reasonable person and an advocate, I think the state, whether they ever have to explain it or not, all it really would take is one judge to say, wait a minute, we got a problem here because we got some really poignant and conflicting parts of or a story. We got two parties that don't agree. And yeah, they could just slob it off and say, you don't have enough and deny her a hearing. But I don't know. I know a lot of people have really thought that this is not enough. But I think the potential there is there that even if Judge Angie denies it, because this is going to her, that the Court of Appeals might say, look, we need to have a hearing and get some people in here to swear and get some more information before they make a final decision. Because if Judge Angie denies it, obviously Zellner is going to appeal. I'm sure she will.
I thought it was ridiculous that the state said, well, she just described it, the call and unidentified this and that. But that's what happens in motions that I file. I have one case where there's a video involved. I just described it in the motion, but when we have a hearing, I will I will produce the video. And I think Kathleen would do the same thing. She would produce the audio. Or I know she would. So,
Absolutely. Yep. And get Sawinski on the stand, get Singlove on the stand, and, anyone else that possibly even the dispatcher, and I know they field a lot of calls, and I know it was a long time ago. At the same time, if let's just say Sawinski's accounting is true, even if he didn't say it was Bobby at the time when he called, he saw someone and he told that to Singlove. What did Singlove do? That is the question. So I don't know. It raises it raised my eyebrow. I can tell you that, because we said, what did we say way back when when Sawinski thing was filed? We got to have some more. We don't believe it. You need more. Boom. We got a call. Okay. So we've got more. Is there something else? Well, I don't know. We don't have anything else beyond that. Again, this second part of this call for us does not exist. If somebody else out there has got it, hey, please bring it forward. Let's hear it. Okay. Any other comments or questions about that? Anybody want to pile on to my piling on? Because, the point is the state controls the evidence. Look at this. 17 years later, we finally get, I think there were 400 and something calls total that we got. It was a huge undertaking for me and yours and Zoe when we had to. You've got to make a video and convert it, because you can't just upload the audio per se. They want it in a video format to YouTube. So, it was a big thing. People drove crazy, I'm sure, with the notifications. But this is a huge deal of suddenly finding after 17 years. Well, what else is stuck back in the door? Is the zipper voicemail or labeled incorrectly and sitting somewhere in a box? I think it probably is. That's my opinion. But I think it smacks us right in the face of corruption when you have that many CDs of calls that these lawyers have been asking for years. Is that they don't get it, and there's a reason for that. So
I was going to say, Jackson, when does it become the tipping point? When does the state have to concede that, yeah, you're right, this is actually very, very damaging? Why not put it in front of a judge? If you're that confident, then, let's discuss it. Discuss it in a logical manner and say, well, wait a minute, someone's ringing up on November the 6th, talking about potentially seeing two people push the victim's vehicle onto the property, and you don't think that's significant? And then Sawinski actually names Bobby Dassey. Now, let's just say that that's completely wrong. It's irrelevant. There are two people. He never said it was Stephen. He never said it was Brendan. All right? Now, I think Tom Sawinski will know who Stephen Avery is, because it's in the newspaper and on TV all the time because of the civil depositions. So he pretty clearly would have said, yeah, they look like Stephen Avery. He never said Stephen. That's significant. And remember Seglob? One day later, where's Seglob? Cuss Road, Search Team A. Isn't that remarkable? Isn't that remarkable?
It is. And, another connection. And the lack of reporting from MTSO is significant, and not the inability for us to get a lot of the photographic evidence that was collected. This last one, I talked about it the other day. Officer Block from the city police took over 200 photographs, and they're degraded. And Uyghur's fine with that. They're degraded. You can't have them. But he's making no attempt to try to secure another copy of this evidence that's part of the case. Maybe it's an irrelevant part. Maybe these photographs show nothing. Maybe they do. It's just this whole mindset around this case that I have a real problem with. And another large part of the reason that I advocate the way I have, because if there's nothing to hide, then why are you hiding so much? Why are you withholding so much? Why is there so many problems with getting just some of the most easiest stuff that should be able to be got? It shouldn't be a question. So anyway, all right. Well, for me, guys, we've had a wonderful discussion. We've been going for 3 hours and 20 minutes. So if anybody has anything to add, let's get to it. Don't tell me you guys are talked out. I don't believe you.
Well, I just want to read a comment by Anthony Hills. He says the state wouldn't think it's important only if they were certain this won't go anywhere. Why would the state think that?
Well, again, it goes back. They've linked arms and deny, and find some of the most ridiculous ways to justify a lot of the things they've done. Saying that, a state assistant attorney general, a special prosecutor, a couple of cops can just have a bone giveaway, and it's inexplicable. We just can't explain why they did that. That's a huge deal. Not denying me and probably other people that may have asked who initiated contact in 2011 to allegedly get these bones back. That's significant, because if the state rang them up and said, "Hey, we think we're in the clear, you can have these bones," knowing that the statute does not read that way. It does not. And it was completely just like buried. Like, so what? Big deal. I think it's wrong. And I think I pray that some judge or someone in authority will step in finally and say, what the hell's going on here? Okay, anyone else? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment to what you said, Jack. Sometimes I feel like that's the only thing that we have left, and I know that's a negative attitude, but I feel like we're like approaching that point of somebody from the outside with some sort of authority's got to finally look at all this and say, wait a minute, something's not right here. Why all these motions? Why all these rebuttals? Why all these counter motions? What is going on? Let's take a look, and some sort of independent counsel or something.
Federal.
Look at yeah, because it just feels like it's just going to be a back and forth, and everybody's just getting, most of all, Stephen for sure, is just getting frustrated at how the state can keep coming up with ways. But I have to say, when, breaking down those 8 points the way we did tonight definitely puts a different, one by one, definitely gives you a different way to think about it. There might be all these other outside little, pieces of frosting, that's been put on the whole response, but breaking it down to those 8 points the way that we did definitely makes me see it and feel differently about it, for sure.
I think Comfort was snarky, snide.
Yes.
When she didn't really need to be. She's an assistant attorney general for a state. I don't give a shit what state it is. And she was really unprofessional, I think, in the way she worded a lot of it.
It was very unprofessional.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it really sets a dangerous precedence as well. If you're going to be a smart ass like that. And she also made the comment about the moviegoers, right? Any moviegoer will find it so hard to accept, blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking to yourself, man, there are two people in prison, right? If they're guilty, that's where they belong. But by God, if they're innocent and they haven't done anything, you need to get them out. You need to get to the truth, right? And the fact that they can just muck around and laugh like that, I think is just so disingenuous. It really, really is. Crazy stuff.
Absolutely. And, again, we've talked about this with Big Jeff and others. The erosion of our civil rights is a real thing. The first 10 amendments to our Constitution is considered our Bill of Rights, and they encompass a lot. Now, they're not everything, because the 14th Amendment gets brought in a lot into that mix. But, what the jury didn't get to see, because in a large part, the defense didn't know about it. Now, did Beauty and Strang make mistakes? Of course they did. They made a lot of mistakes. But the issue moving forward past that is Stephen didn't have lawyers for whatever reason. I can't go up into what Hagopian went through and what all she did and what maybe she didn't have access to, or even have funds to be able to do what she really needed to do. Otherwise, this could have been potentially overturned years ago.
Yes.
So we've got things coming up. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
You're right. From an outsider looking in, the state are withholding material. You could tell. And people that want access to that material to study it, they're making it very hard to. And I'm telling you, Kathleen Zellner's finding all these gold nuggets, and the state is saying, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. So what, so what, so what? They are worried. They are truly, truly worried that it's going to have on the grand scheme of things, it's going to bring an element of doubt, right? So now they're acknowledging, my God, the RAV4 was off the property. Who cares? Oh my God, someone bought the RAV4 on the property and Bobby Dassey was named. So what? But at the end of the day, Jack 61, an impartial judge is saying, wait a minute, your whole theory was that Stephen and Brendan killed her, cremated her, and her RAV4 never left the property. What the hell what the hell are all these people's observations of a RAV4 leaving the property? Does that mean Stephen was correct? Right? And how come you're going to extraordinary lengths to protect Bobby Dassey, whereas someone else could have said, damn it, he was a freaking co-conspirator. Why didn't we see it in the first place? Nope. So their behavior, Jack 61, says a lot, and you're correct. It says a lot.
Absolutely. We see their behavior even to this day. I talked about it last week. There is an interview of Brendan that we don't have. It's on cassette. And I knew it would have to be converted. And all of a sudden I get I paid for it, or I was waiting for it, and didn't hear nothing. And that brings up the Remaker. I want to talk about this just briefly. This Remaker video that we've got, it's got white noise. This is exactly what is that I posted and shared on the walkthrough that Remaker did. That is exactly what I got. It's white noise. So they have intentionally blanked whatever he's talking about out of that video and added white noise in, so that they've tampered with it. Andy ran it through his wizard machine for me, got him the file, and he can't find anything. I was suspicious that he wouldn't, but hell, we might as well try. He's got the audio and software stuff to do it with. So,
yes.
Why would they do that? Why are they intentionally messing with this evidence? The Kratz video from Calumet County in the privacy room. Again, not supposed to be any electronics in those rooms, no recording devices, yet they did it. So what? No big deal. Again, it goes into civil rights for someone. Stephen's not been we can all agree he's done some really pretty stupid shit in his life. But that doesn't mean, for me, that anyone that acts like an asshole sometimes can get accused of murder and thrown in jail and his life taken away from him. And his nephew gets yanked into it by the neck. He hasn't done shit except, he just didn't have the tools to defend himself. He's also locked away for life. I have a problem with it, and I'll keep talking about it. That's my part of advocacy. I can't really do much of anything else except keep talking about it, and that's what I intend to do. So, T1 had asked a question. I saw this before we go. Question: is this typical or normal to refuse an evidentiary hearing this many times? Think Stephen Avery had one in 96 on the nail scrapings, right? Only took 10 to 11 years in his first conviction. That's a good question. I dare say, others can have their own opinion, but I dare say they do not want Zellner inside a courtroom in any capacity whatsoever. You never know what's going to get said. That's the problem, right? You never know where that can lead.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not legalese enough to know the full answer to that. I don't know. That would take Tracy or Travis or one of our legal people to maybe comment about how many times they trying to get an evidentiary hearing. But to me, in this instance, I don't know how they can untangle this without calling some people in and getting them under oath and talking about it. That's me, and that's our process. All right. Yeah. All right. I rambled on enough about that. I'm sure at some point I'll probably ramble again about it. But it really bothers me. 17 years later, we get another, pile of CDs and DVDs of shit that's been withheld for years by a records custodian that faces nothing. It's fine. It's okay. I have a problem with that. Anyway. Anyone have anything else to add? Susan, you've been kind of quiet. Did we put you to sleep? I think we put.
Oh no, I'm here. I don't think I have more to add. I think it was a great discussion tonight.
Yep, I agree. Rhonda, final thoughts?
Susan, it was a great discussion. And again, like I said before, I really appreciate that we were able to break those 8 points down. And, when at the end of it, when Doc would ask, was it Stephen? Was it Bobby? Was it a third party? Or, that really, was it possible that it could have been Bobby? It puts it all, it gave us a chance to say it's possible Bobby could have done it, but it's also possible that Stephen could have done it. And it's also possible that, a third party could have done it. And when you say it like that, when you break it down like that and ask those questions at the end, like I said, it really did make me, it made me feel a little bit better about,
Yes.
the response to begin with.
And that's why, just Rhonda, as we've spoken about this many, many times, if this material had been brought up in 2007 during Stephen's trial, you wouldn't see him sitting in a jail cell near the Brendan. There would have been a huge element of doubt.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
I have to agree. And Comper said that a number of times. Would it have mattered in trial? Well, you're damn right. I think that would have been a real problem for the state, and I just don't know how they could have overcome that. So, okay, guys, remember the merch store? We talked about it at the beginning. It is the season. I'm plugging it again. Susan and Zoe have done a lot of really, really good work. If you have an idea or suggestion for something you'd like to see, remember, all profits from that, they go to some organization that is there to help defendants or forensic science or whatever. So,
And I'll just say that I did scroll through the chat and write down everybody's suggestions. So I'll work on those tomorrow.
that's fantastic. Look at you go. You go.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I'll probably schedule an open mic tomorrow. We're going to get back into the Coburn stuff. Actually, Cherie did get us a document 340 got filed yesterday, I think. I've got it, but I think we're at 333, so we're going to try to get through some more of those because likely this coming week, I don't think I'll be out of commission long, but definitely will be moving, and so it'll be a couple of days. Definitely won't be able to do a live, so we'll probably talk about Coburn v. Netflix tomorrow for a period of time, tomorrow afternoon, and see how far we can get in those. And then I think, Doc, you said you and Everly are going to take another week, so maybe.
Yeah. One where Neverly, I think, has got some things to get done next week. But what I'll do, try and work in the background, try and get a new chapter going. But so next week, no reading with the crew, but the week after we're back, unless it's Christmas. Unless it's Christmas.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the calendar. Yeah, we're getting close. So, all righty, folks. Yep, we'd like to thank everyone. It's been a really great discussion. I have to agree with Rhonda and everyone. It's been a really great discussion. Don't lose hope. Keep digging. Keep asking questions. Those of you that write open records requests, don't stop. Don't get discouraged. Trust me, I know. But you just got to pick up and reword and move on. We really appreciate you guys coming and staying with us and through this. We've been on for a while, but again, it's been a great discussion. And with that said, this has been a Foul Play production.
See everyone.